good morning. It's a pleasure to be here on a rainy day here in Louisville to Sort Your Hog Show. Got a nice class of Berkshires here to start with this morning. Lost a couple to the scale, I'm assuming on the lighter end of things here. We got the pins full. We're going to go ahead and release these 5 to head back to the barn, but let's give them a round of applause for bringing them out here today. Got a good day, got to have a good show. Got a nice pair to start with here as we get into the lightweight Berkshire class, and 2 hogs that rise to the top fairly easy in my opinion when you start combining with the structure and mass and bulk and density and combining that with a good look. Hogs that are good in terms of their balance and profiles from the side. I think there's differences between the two. I don't think it's a landslide either way. I'm going to tell you what I see in each one of them in no particular order. The young lady over here to my left has got one that, man, that thing's upper line is very, very good. When you start talking about the levelness to his top and the length and levelness to the top side of his hip, that's a stouter mugged barrow that's bigger in his arm and bigger in the base of his chest. Maybe not necessarily bigger where his foot hits the surface, but man, that thing is dense. That thing is broad and bulky. Got a very good hip and hind leg. I actually prefer the set to his upper hip versus the other barrow that's directly in front of me. Man, this thing is sharp and dialed in from a skin and hair standpoint, and I do appreciate that about that. The young lady's neater headed barrow is maybe not quite as big and dense in his arm, maybe not quite as square in his knee. He's square where his foot hits the surface than the other barrow, but maybe not quite as square in his knee. Maybe he wants to roll in his hip and tuck his hind leg there just a little bit, ever so slightly. So I think you got some differences between the two. I prefer the young lady in the red. She's going to go ahead and win this particular class. Young lady here will be second in a close decision. Congratulations to both of them. Young lady coming out in third, I told her, I said, I don't think your barrow wants to be a show barrow. He didn't want to give his head, but she's doing a great job of getting him stuck and sticking with him. A hog that just gives up a lot in terms of maturity and just density, especially as you take him down in there to his arm and to his front foot. A hog that gives up some in terms of squareness of chest. Profile and balance from the side, hip and hind leg is very good. Do appreciate a lot of things about that particular barrow. This one here on the standstill is going to give you a pretty good look. He's got a big old stout flag tail coming out the top side of his hip. That thing is big, and his engine in terms of the center portion of his body, he wants to cave too much as he comes right at you in his knee, in his chest. and a hog that maybe wants to push the outer limits as he gets away from you. But I think a hog that has some value here in this particular class. Man, if we could put a different hind leg in this one coming here next, we talk about moving this one up, because I like a lot of things about the front 2/3 of this one. He just has got a hitch in his giddy up as he gets away. Just needs to be a little smoother in terms of how he sets in his hock and how he sets his foot to the surface. A lot of good in that particular one. Just has to have a better hind leg for this particular judge today. Just a good pattern kind of a gilt coming here next that's not stout enough in her feature and her jaw to get up any higher in the base of her chest, but a good practical kind of a hog that's just going to keep you out of the ditch all the time. We got several as we go down the line here that maybe just like to correct from a feet and leg or balance standpoint, but a nice class to get started on. Let's give them a round as they head them back, or give them a round of applause as they head them back.
Results out of Class 1, Berkshire's first goes to Kara Griner, Indiana. Second, Madison Ross, Ohio. Third, Paisley Tyndall, Ohio. Fourth, Dean Van Ryn, Indiana. And fifth, Gray Emmenheiser, Indiana. We are now showing Class 2, Berkshire's.
Looks like we might have had a little more trouble with the scale here on the top end sort again. We got several of them here. Just a nice project pigs as we take them back that here again maybe don't balance up quite as well from the side or maybe not quite as good in terms of their structure. But just let's give these kids a hand as they head them back if we could. As we get into the heavyweight class of Berkshire Barrows here, I think we got a very logical class winner to go ahead and win this particular class. Young lady headed towards the outgate there in the green, I think brings us a barrow that is very, very good in his own particular right. Talk about a hog that balances up and in terms of height at the point of his shoulder being equivalent to the height at the point of his hip. Hog that's head and neck ties very good into the top side of his blade for this particular breed and for this particular class as well. A hog that matches bone to muscle mass and bulk-wise just fits together very, very well. I think a very nice place to start. The young man right here brings us one that I didn't pin initially. He was just a little tighter moving off of those rear two as he come out. But as you study what we have to work with here in the class, this hog just is truer in terms of his width and his squareness from end to end. Hog that's really, really fresh up high, and I do appreciate that about him. Hip is long enough. Just like to make that stride a little easier and just freer as he goes right directly across the ring. The barrow in 3 comes in a few more pieces in terms of maybe wanting to be a little cresty at the top side of his neck and rolling his hip there just a little bit. A hog that does have some general width and squareness and shape and muscle mass up high from a market hog scenario standpoint. Hog we just like to put together in his lines a little bit better as you go watch him from the side go across the ring, but a nice third place barrow. Young man coming here in 4 has got one here again that comes in a few more pieces. Has some advantages in terms of the rest of the class, in terms of extra bulk and density and readiness up high. Just like to balance him better off of both ends of his skeleton, raise him up at the point of his shoulder and correct his hind leg there just a little bit. Painting a picture of this one from the side gives you a pretty good look. It's when he comes right at you that gets him into the 5 hole. A hog that wants to cave in his chest and his knee too much for me in this particular breed. A hog that runs out of gas from a forearm and front foot standpoint there as well. Do appreciate his extension and his look ahead of his blade. Just not packing enough punch there today to get him worked up any higher. Got a lot of barrows here as we go on down the line. Just need to correct a hip and hind leg right here. Make that thing plant and distribute his weight a little more evenly as he goes directly away from you. Got a bunch of barrows here that we just like to blend a little better from front to rear. Nice class of Berkshire barrows.
Results out of Class 2. Berkshire's first goes to Piper Unger, Indiana. Second, Max Wagner, Indiana. Third, Lily Willis, Arkansas. Fourth, Jackson Hemmelman, Indiana. And fifth, Kenley Shreve, Arkansas. We are now ready to show for Champion in Reserve, Berkshire Market Hog. Out of Class number 1, congratulations to Kara Greiner. Second in that class was Madison Ross. Out of your just completed Class number 2, congratulations to Piper Unger. Second in that class was Max Wagner. Please put your hands together for these two individuals as they show for Champion Berkshire Market Hog.
Well, we get two class winners out here that I guess I'm very satisfied with in terms of hogs that look similar, bring the same kind of qualities to the table in terms of stoutness and extra feature, and the extras just in general. I think there's not really much of a difference from a bone standpoint here. There's not that much difference from a look or shape or muscle standpoint or freshness standpoint as we get up high. They both paint a pretty good picture from the side. There's one place where I separate them, and it's coming right at you. There's one that's just a little better in terms of how he sets his angulation in his shoulder. He's better in terms of how he comes out of his shoulder, goes to his knee, and goes to the surface, and how he plants his front foot square at the surface. That's the young lady's heavyweight. She's going to be your champion. Congratulations to her.
Your champion, Berkshire Market Hog, comes out of Class number 2. Congratulations, Piper Unger from Indiana. That drops in Max Wagner for reserve.
We bring that second place out and just talked about him. I mean, front two-thirds of that thing I think are awful good. Just maybe like to free him up and hinge him a little better off of those rear two. I think the other one just brings a little more freshness to the table, a little more youthfulness, especially up there through his head. This one's an awful good one. Congratulations to her.
Your reserve Berkshire Barrel comes out of Class number 1. Congratulations from Indiana, Kara Greiner. Attention in the barns, attention in the barns. It is not a suggestion for you to wear your back tag. It is a requirement. Please wear your back tags.
Very deep class of Chesters here, and just got one class in this particular breed, and we're going to let a couple of them go back that I think in a normal setting certainly would be catching a pin, maybe even towards the top end of another class here. Just going to talk about a couple of them. The young lady here, I mean, that thing paints an awesome picture from the side. If you just prop him up on the backdrop, I mean, I think I'm seeing that barrow at probably 2 o'clock versus 12 o'clock. I mean, there's just not enough punch and width and mass and spread underneath in relation to what he has up high. Wants to get a little more vertical in terms of his blade there as well. But the young lady's done an outstanding job of getting him presented, skin and hair-wise, getting him driven. I think a very, very nice pig to be sending back. Got one here come in early. The young man's just having a little trouble getting drove. That wants to be a little piecier off each end, but I do appreciate the fact of how fresh and square back this hog is. He kind of wants to push a little bit on those rear two and kind of camp them up underneath of him and close up at the surface as he comes directly to you. But if you could just, kind of paint a picture from the side in terms of one that's got a good look and a fresh back, there's an awful lot of good there. Just not sure if the top matches the bottom well enough to take him on up into a placing pin here. Got some other nice barrows here, but let's give these kids a round of applause as they head them back.
Well, good morning. Certainly excited to be in Louisville, Kentucky to sort through the North American over here on the Crossbred side. And we got a nice class here to start us off with. What we got left in the ring, we're going to go ahead and dismiss on back, but discuss a few of them. The blue gilt down here to my left, extra stout, got good body shape to her there. Just need to correct her off of both ends and maybe freshen her up a little bit. Got another belted bear here that's tall shouldered and good in terms of his top line. Just wants to get a little off in his hip and a little off in the way that he goes. Off belted gilt, there's another one. Just want to change up underneath, wants to close up, needs to be stoutened up a little bit. Got a couple other ones out here that design up well, maybe just need a shot more to them. Got a little black bear over here, just needs to be changed in terms of his maturity pattern. Good class of lightweights. Let's go and give those kiddos a good round of applause as they head on back.
As I alluded to there earlier, a very, very nice Chester barrel class, Chester gilt and barrel class, I guess I should say. I think we got a top pair out here that surfaced pretty quick from a combination of freshness and youthfulness tied together with the right amount of structure, the right kind of shape, the right kind of look, and the right kind of balance. Now, when we start to separate this pair, I think as you just get into them and watch them come and go, that's what's going to separate them. I think we've got one that's just got more bulk and density as he comes right directly at you, goes a little square and more open to the surface, has a little bit more shape at the base of his cage and just a little more punch through the lower third of his body, and certainly has that advantage going away. The young lady there in the blue is going to go ahead and win this particular class. Congratulations to her. Now, this young man's barrel, when he comes in and he gets his head pulled, and then that thing's athleticism. I actually think that hog's a little better in the set and angulation to his shoulder if we're going to get nitpicky on this pair. Hog you'd maybe like to clean up at the top side of his neck just ever so slightly. More than anything, just get into the middle section of him and just give him more in terms of shape to his lower cage and just more to the center portion of his body cavity. Appreciate his flexibility and his athleticism and his balance. Young man does a good job of getting him drove. This one here I would have liked to have seen probably 3 weeks ago or maybe better. I think this one's been around a little while, but studying the basics and the fundamentals of just good hogs, this is a very good animal. He's just got too much frame size to fill it out and bulk it up the way it needs to be and freshen up in this particular setting. Like his pattern, like his balance, like his bone, and like his hip and hind leg. Just got to be more of him coming and going. Now this one here is the fresher one of that pair as this lighter weight one comes right directly at you. Just like to stouten this one from a forearm and front foot standpoint. He wants to read a little more fragile up through the front third of his skeleton than he does the rear third. But talk about fresh, shapely, square, good-headed, lots of good in this particular one. Just looks like he's running out of gas up front there to get him moved on up any higher. He is more compositionally correct than the barrel that comes out in 5. Just basics of everyday hog production, just fundamentals. This is a good barrel right here. Big rib cavity, or big rib cage, excuse me, in this particular barrel. Hog that's hip and hind leg is very good. Extra structure, extra stoutness. We got to clean him at the base of his neck. We got to peel a little out of his elbow pocket and off of his loin edge there and just give him a little more shape. True and honest shape to get him any higher today, but I think a very, very good hog to stand in the 5 hole. Got one here, front 2/3 I like extremely well. He wants to tuck and duck in his hip and hind leg and kind of throw his hind leg outside the plane of his skeleton as he gets directly away from you. front 2/3 of that hog is awful good. Young lady's doing an outstanding job of getting him drove. If we could restructure this one off of both ends of his skeleton, he might win the class, because from the side, you think, man, this thing is awful good. I love his head and neck. I love his freshness. I love his upper lines. I like the length of his hip. The hog wants to cave too much as he goes to the surface, coming directly at you, and he wants to push too much in that, especially in that right rear hock as he goes directly away. Doesn't affect his athleticism, but that thing's pushing too much for me, and he's caving too much as he comes right directly at you to get him worked up any higher in this particular class. The young man coming right here, good productive looking kind of a barra here again. Wants to pitch forward in his shoulder there a little bit and run out of gas as you take him to the surface up front. But I think just a good practical kind of a barra with a good hip and hind leg. He too just needs more general width at the surface. As we keep him coming here, finishing out the class, got a hog here that maybe just doesn't quite balance up on his upper top line, wants to give up in his hip loin there a little bit, kind of throw his balance. A hog that maybe like to spread at the surface as he gets directly away from you, and maybe just kind of blending, like I said, a little better front to rear. But I think a very nice 9th place barra. Here again, we got one that just needed to be shown probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. There's just not enough of this one left, but a good pattern kind of a hog to finish us out here in this particular class.
Well, over here on the crossbred side, I think we got a pair that soared up pretty quick for me, and I think they're similar in terms of their look and their presence, their general build from the side. I guess to me where the biggest difference lies is the young lady in white's going to go ahead and be 1. That's just the fresher appearing barra. In terms of skin and hair, you get right up on the top side of him. He transitions with more true shape right out of the back side of his shoulder. He gets out and goes very well. From the side, I still would lengthen his hip just a bit. I'd like to man him up in terms of his front ankle and his front foot just a little bit there. I think that's a square built, genuine made kind of show barra. That's good in terms of his body shape. Like I said, extra fresh, extra good in terms of his look from profile. Same can be said about the Baron too. I love his height to shoulder. I love his height to length ratio. I think he is a notch longer hip maybe than the Barra that we start with. With that being said though, to me he's still just a shot more limited in terms of how he gets out and goes and uses his hock. Biggest thing is as we get into the front end of his body at this particular weight, this particular time frame, I want to freshen that thing up in terms of his jawline, in terms of his skull, to make him make that pair just that much closer. But I thought general build, condition, shape, design, I thought he's the one that next needed to move up in this particular class. The black-headed Barra, he's probably the most powerful one of the top 3 when you study him in terms of chest, arm, maybe center body, and just upper cage. To me, he's another one that gets a little more limited in the way that he goes off of his rear too, wants to start to put a little pressure on his outside toe. Another one just like to freshen him up a little bit there at the top of his pole, clean him up in his flank there just a little bit as well. The one that is maxed out in terms of back shape and just look and presence ahead of his blade is the Bear that comes out next, and I appreciate that about him. I just got to make him more mobile in the way that he gets out and goes. He's just tighter and more limited up front, especially tighter and more limited in the way that he goes off of his rear too. Maybe clean his rear joint up just a hair. Presentation, shape, mass, up high, width, squareness is all very good. Nice kind of Bear there to land in 4. Hog that comes out next here in 5. Another one you appreciate his look ahead of his blade, stoutness of his skull, the shape up high. He's another one who wants to get just a little flatter in terms of his rib cage. He wants to get a little narrower in terms of his chest. Another one, once again, as we study him back there and the way he uses his hip and hind leg, just want to free him up and make things a little bit easier for him. As we go down here, 6, the solid black gilt is one that's got some chest width and some body shape. Like to stouten her up at the ground and just make everything fit and blend together just a shade better. The black-headed Bear that comes out here next, another one that's fresh up high and good body, just wants to get too off in terms of his hip. We got to collect him better there and push him down in his spine. Just make him grab a different gear when he gets out and goes. Belted Bear, belted hog here that comes out next. Another one that's good in terms of body and muscle. Got to freshen him up a little bit, open him up a little bit underneath. Calico got to peel just a little bit of bark off of that one for a lightweight class for me, but got some mass and some body. One we close with there, got some stoutness of feature, just got to open him up, freshen him up a little bit. Good class of lights to start us off with. Good round of applause for those kiddos.
Results out of our just completed Chester division. Your first and champion goes to Haley Walker from Colorado. Second and reserve, Hayes Platt, Indiana. Third, Preston Ford, Iowa. Fourth, Summer Carothos, Arkansas. And fifth, Allie Hankus, Illinois. We are now showing Class 4 Durocs. Results out of Class 13. Crossbreds. First goes to Alexa Graham, Michigan. Second, Camlin Dimnich, Indiana. Third, Bryson Cooper, Indiana. Fourth, Jake Seymour, Arkansas. And fifth, Zane Eisen, Kentucky.
Interesting class of red ones. It looks like we lost at least one or two to the scale here as we get into the lightweight class of red ones. Just got lots and lots of pieces out here and hogs that that bring some good to the table, but yet are deficient in some areas there as well. But let's congratulate these kids as they head them back.
Another good class here, and one that's got a little bit more depth to it as we get into to our second class over here. Got some bears heading back that still have some value. The more traditional belted bear there, the young lady in the blue's got. That one's got some shape up high. He just comes in a few more pieces from the side. Want to change him up in his top line and change him out there through his hip and just make everything balance. Come together there a little bit better. The blue bear here's one's pushing a little extra cover. Got a big rib cage laid into him. Another one here has got some height of shoulder to him. Just got to give him more true shape and spread up high. Another bear here, it's pushing a little extra cover in terms of the white belted one there. He is square and genuine underneath, though. I think a really good class, top to bottom. Let's give those kiddos a hand as they head on back to their pens.
Interesting pair as we get to the top end of this particular class. And I think these two sort themselves there very, very easy in my personal opinion, just in terms of freshness and dimension and shape and balance as you crawl off to the side of them. I think the differences lie, and there's maybe one that's a little more ready in terms of his condition today, and maybe there's a little one that's more correct in terms of the set to his hind leg and where he plants and drives off of it at the surface. That's the young lady right here to my particular right. He's going to go ahead and win this particular class. Not the heavier weight barrow of the two. He is the biggest armed, stoutest one coming right at you. His front foot's right there on the edge of being where it needs to be from a strength standpoint, but it's not in affecting his movement at all. I'd like to maybe put just a little flesh in that thing's hip-loin junction there just a little bit, and I think that's where this young lady's barrow is a little bit better in terms of readiness from a flesh standpoint. If we could take the hip and hind leg off of the one and put in the one in second, it would be very, very easy for me, because if you get behind this second place barrow, he's just planting a little bit too much pressure on his outside hoof wall. I mean, it's all staying fairly square, I guess, to say it conservatively, but it doesn't need to be any more than it is. I think a hog that paints a good picture from the side just got to correct his hind leg and his rear foot to work him on up into that one hole. One here that comes in a little different pieces. I mean, a hog that's a little raw at the top of his blade wants to get up in his hip-loin junction there just a little bit and kind of just give up some overall width and mass and punch to those top two in this class. Study him just from end to end. He's a square-chested hog that comes at you good, leaves you good. Stoutness of skull and feature is all very, very good. He's just not as manly and as dense up high in comparison to those top two to get him worked up any higher. Got one here that is a little bit more ready up high than our third place Barra. Just runs out of gas as you take him to the surface. For all that mass he has up high, he doesn't match it from a bone and arm and foot size standpoint, and even lower jaw standpoint as you watch him go across the ring. Got one here that just needs more substance. They don't have to be the absolute biggest legged for me, but this one's borderline pushing to the frail end of things for today's standards. Like a lot of things about him. Just got to give him more feature to get him worked on up any higher. Got one here that's got some interesting pieces that wasn't driving very well for that young person when he come out there at first. I mean, a hog that once he drives and puts himself together, like I said, it has some interesting pieces. I like his hip and hind leg. I like his tail root. A hog that wants to cave in his knee and his chest a little bit too much, get a little drier in his forerib there as well, and maybe just not as good in terms of the angulation to his shoulder. We got several of them on down the line here. We just need to correct in their upper lines and their hind leg more than anything. Just balance them better from the side. Nice class of reds, though. Congratulations to these kids.
We got a good class over here on the crosses, and I think there's some give and take as we go through even these top six, and maybe not one that just jumps out and says, hey, I'm the one I need to use, and the one I keep coming back to is one that came through early, and I think he's one that's hard to pick a hole in. He's maybe not just super exciting in any one regard. I think he's the truest, he's the most genuine, he's fresh in terms of how he's put together. That's the young lady's Blue Bear right here closest to me. That one's square and true in the way he comes at you through his knee and through his front foot. He's got a big square hip and a good functional hind leg. When he leaves you, he proportions right from the side. Is he just tricked out in terms of his look and shape up high or his extension up front? No, he's not, and that's where you may just say, well, he's not one that just grabs my attention. But I tell you, when you take the time to just break him down and study him for what he is, he represents the most quality in this particular drive to me. The white belted bear is going to come next in two. If we just step off to the side of him, he's the one that grabs my attention. That one's height of shoulder, his stoutness of skull, the stoutness to his jaw, his look and extension ahead of his blade, combined with his comfort and his density at the ground. That's the way I want him to look. Coming at you, I got to make him a shade better at his knee. Leaving you, I got to make him a shade better in his right rear in order for me to make him the one that I feel like I need to use. I do like his look. I do like his proportion. I still think he's better in terms of his chest and his forerib than the bear that's going to come out next here in three. One that comes out next in three, from his shoulder blade back, I can get on board. That one's got a good turn to the middle part of his body. He's big and fresh up high. He's got a great big square hip. Leaves you with a square hind leg that functions extremely well. Young lady coming right at you in terms of that one's chest. He's got to be more manly. We got to fix him there. We got to spread him at his knee. We do that to make him more genuine in terms of his composition and everything from there back. That one could be game on as well. Just got to change him in that regard to make him move up in this particular class. The one that is tricked out in terms of shape, in terms of look and extension up front, and hair is the gilt that comes out next. Like all those things about her. Where I get critical of her is right there at the ground up front. She gets a little longer and softer in terms of her front foot. Step in behind her and watch her go from behind. She wants to swing him and plant him east and west. Too much for me. We got to bring her back inside the plane of her skeleton. And with that, true, when you step in behind her, she doesn't have as much pin width and true shape to the bottom portion of her ham as what those three that we go with ahead of her to handle her hind leg and an off-hander like she does. The narrow-belted bear that comes out next. Another one that's got some very good pieces. I love this one's chest. I love his cage. I love the size of his front arm. All those things are very, very intriguing. He's another one. We step in behind him. We want to spread him at his pins. I thought of the initial five. He's the one that runs out of horsepower down at the ground in terms of bone, rear foot size, ankle size up front. Another one wants to get a little soft in the way that he meets the surface off of his front end. Bear that comes out next here in six. Another one you like a lot of things about. He's got good shape up up high. He's good in the mid part of his body. He's another one. Gets a little frailer and more refined in terms of his muzzle and jaw, in terms of his rear ankle when he meets the surface there. Another one, too, when he comes right at you, I want to square up from his knee to the ground just a little bit to make him more genuine in terms of his width. Got a bear here that's another one that's got some extra length and extension ahead of his blade. A very comfortable skeleton bear, and I appreciate that about him. He just comes a little off in terms of his proportions. He's a little more mature in terms of his head and neck in relation to being one that's a little longer bodied and a little shorter hipped. All that just needs to blend and come together just a little bit better for him to move up in this particular class. Another one here that's fit out to a T in terms of skin and hair. Appreciate those things about him. At the same time, he's just got to go better off of both ends. He's too hesitant off of both ends in terms of his step. A little more mature looking in terms of his head. Like to square him up behind 9 and 10. Got a bear here we close with that's good bodied and got some shape up high. He wants to swivel and bow out just a little much behind. Blue bear can give you a good look from the side, and he's more true muscle from behind. Still want to square him up in terms of his rear too. Good class there. Good round of applause for those kiddos as they head on back.
Results. Out of Class 4, Duroc. First goes to Maddie Antrup, Michigan. Second goes to Maddie Antrup, Michigan. Third goes to Allie Ayers, Indiana. Fourth goes to Colton Evinger, Indiana. And fifth goes to Landry Mitchell, Arkansas. Results out of Class 14, Crossbreds. First goes to Ashton Harvey. Second, Sydney Loudermilk. Third, Millie Foster. Fourth, Landry Mitchell. And fifth, Connor Reed, Indiana. We are now showing Class 15 crosses.
Well, I'm sure this will probably be more hogs than I weigh in a day here in this particular class. But we got a deep class of red ones here. We got lots of looks like a bag of Skittles. We got lots of different shapes and sizes and colors and packages over here. But we got a few of them that we're going to have to let go back that need and deserve pins, in my opinion. The young man right here in the red. I mean, in any other class, that hog needs a pin. I mean, that's just a good basic kind of a hog. He wants to run downhill just a little bit, maybe not be quite fresh enough in the center portion of his body, but I think that's a nice barrow. The young lady in the center of the ring with the maroon top on brings a good patterned hog from the side that just runs out of density and just kind of runs out of balance from the side. He wants to roll in his hip, get a little deeper in his throat, maybe just not quite as stout in his rear leg as he goes directly away. There's a couple others here. A young lady coming right across the center of the ring's got a nice kind of fresh enough kind of barrow that wants to cave in the center portion back there in his hip loin and just become a little plain down his back, but it gives you a good look out in front of his blade. Let's give all these kids a round of applause as they head them back for a nice class of red ones.
Deep class over here on the crosses as well, and some they're going to head on back. The traditional belted gilt in the middle of the ring here is one that can give you a good look from the side. Wants to close up off of both ends a little bit. Got to give her more real shape up high. Got a really good presented barrow here that unfortunately is just not comfortable today off of either end. We make him get out and go a little better, and he could certainly move up in this particular class. Another really good skin and haired barrow here. You appreciate his look and his design. Another one just gets a little soft, a little ouchy up front in the way that he gets out and goes. Tremendous class here. Let's give these kiddos a hand as they head on back. We'll sort through this top end.
Exhibitors in the barn and around ringside, please wear the correct back tag number. Please wear the correct back tag number so when you get sent to the scales, we know who you are. If you do not wear the correct back tag number, you can be disqualified. Please wear the correct back tag number.
Really good class, and once again, I think there's a lot of give and take as we go through the top end of this particular drive, and exactly where you want to set your priorities is probably going to dictate where you want to land. And I think that even be said in this top pair. I think a pair of Blue Hogs that both are awfully good, but both maybe need changed up just a bit in an area or two. To discuss the two in no particular order, the darker Blue Bear here closest to me, man, I love that thing's height to shoulder. I love his proportion and just how he's put together in terms of his height to shoulder. Is his top line, his levelness out to his hip, and his pin set when you step in behind him in terms of how broad he is, and yet he maintains some squareness through his stifle down to his hock and all the way down to his rear foot. Coming at you, I'd change him up, and from his knee to the surface just a little bit. I would like to just freshen him in the mid part of his body, just a hair there as well. I think that's a very good bear that, although he maybe is just a shade shorter in terms of his hip, I like the set to his rear ankle and the use of his rear heel just a shade better than the other bear that's out here with him. No doubt the more predominantly white bear is extra stout in terms of his feature. I love his skull shape. He's more manly coming at you through the base of his chest and through his knee. He's big and he's rolled out up high, got a good turn to his forerib. I guess the biggest issue I have with him is we get back into his hip. I just want to take his tail and pull it back and pull it up and just lengthen his hip, spread his pin set just a little bit, and I think if we did that, I think he'd flex his rear ankle and his rear pastern just a shade better as well. I think that's getting awful critical. I think it's awfully close. Like I said, pick them how you want them. I think it's close between that pair. Ultimately, I think the one that's just that much fresher in terms of how he's put together, in terms of chest, body shape, upper skeleton. This young man's predominantly white bear. He's going to be 1. Blue bear here is going to be 2. Congratulations to both those exhibitors. The bear that comes out next in 3, if we just want to study him from the bottom portion of their body up to the top portion, he's one that we get on board with because that thing is extra good in terms of his rib cage. He's maxed out up high in terms of the width at the top of his blade, width in his upper hip, and shape and turn coming out the backside of his body. Unfortunately, from there to the surface, he wants to close just a little too much off of both ends. I'd like to square him up. I would like to freshen him up at the pole of his neck and just in his cheek, just a little bit there as well to be ideal. But I thought that was a nice kind of bear there to land in 3 that's still probably hinged just a little bit better and a little looser in terms of his hock than the bear that's going to come out next in 4. From the side, in terms of height of shoulder in relation to length of body, I like the bear that comes out next. He's got a lot of good things going for him. He's stout in his mug. He's stout in his arm. He's stout in his rear leg. Step in behind him. He wants to push the limits a little far for where I like in terms of his hock and how he sets on the outside of his hoof wall. From the side, he wants to tie his neck in just a little bit rougher there into his top line, change him in those particular regards, and I think he's a very nice bear there. Blue bear here that comes out next. One that comes in a few more pieces. I like a lot of things about him. He's probably as loose hinged as any that we've had to this point, and I like that about him. He's still good in his chest and good in his arm. He wants to come apart in his top line, and it draws away from his balance. My biggest thing is I step in behind him. He gets a little coarse and a little puffy in terms of his hocks. Clean him up in that regard, and I think maybe just change him in his top line a little. He can push up into that top 5, even that much higher. Bear that comes out next. Another one that's good and fresh in the middle part of his body. Hog that you appreciate that about. I don't feel like he has as much true muscle. We get right up on the top of him. He's a little plainer out of the back of his blade, a little plainer back to his pin set, and yet when we transition him to the surface, he gets a little soft up front, a little frailer in terms of his rear bone as well. Calico that comes out next. Bulky top, kind of a pig. Good in terms of her body shape and her mass up high. A little more limited in terms of her hip and her hock and the way that she goes. She's another one that transitions to the surface, wants to close at her knee, close from behind. Just want to square her up and make her a shade more genuine all the way through. Black-headed gilt that comes out next. Another one's got a big top, a big arm, and a big mug laid into her. For all that, she comes at you too narrow through her chest and through her knee. Want to limber her up, and the way she uses her rear too. Bear that comes out next, fresh back, fresh middle kind of a bear. One that's just pushing a little extra cover. One I'd like to lengthen out a little bit ahead of his blade as well. One we close with, extended made kind of a bear. Just needs to be more comfortable out of his front end. Stouten him up just a shade as well. Good class top to bottom. Lots of types and kinds there. Let's go and give those kiddos a good round of applause.
Well, as we get back over here into the pure ring and get into the heart of the red drive here in this heavyweight class, like I said, when I sent, I think, 10 to the scale, we might even have lost one or two there. I don't know, but I think we got a very, very good class over here with lots of different parts and pieces, and these two surface very easily, in my opinion, to the top of the class when you just start talking about the kind of pictures they paint from the side from an assembly standpoint, how their head and necks and their freshness and come into play. I think as you study them and as you drive them a little bit longer, there is certainly one that is just more dense everywhere. And with that being said, he's the cleaner one at the top of his pull, a hog that certainly has just as much spread, if not more, in shape out the backside of his blade. When you get up on top of him, plants and drives off of a big hind leg and rear foot. There's every once in a while I'd like to change where his left foot hits the left rear hits the surface just every once in a while when he gets to leaning into that young man, but I think he's the best one. Young man in the center of the ring is going to go ahead and win this particular class. Length of hip and length to the top of his hip and levelness that benefit goes to this particular animal right here in second. The longer the drive goes, this thing wants to pitch forward in his blade there a little bit too much and start pushing. A hog that you'd like to clean up at the top side of his neck there ever so slightly. I love that thing's freshness from the back side of his blade to the front side of his hip there. I love his length of hip. I think this is something as a breeder and just looking across breeds, but especially in this breed, we are going to have to focus more on the length and levelness to these things' hips and get their hip loin shoved down in them. That's where this hog's got that advantage. He just needs to be better in that angulation to his shoulder, maybe even a little stouter in his muzzle and the base of his jaw to match all the mass that he has there behind his blade. Got one here that's very, very, very well presented. Young lady does an awesome job of getting him driven. I love the skin and hair texture and the color and freshness to this hog. Wants to bunch up just a little bit. Wants to drop in his hip and roll there just a little bit in his hip loin. Front 2/3 of that thing I think are amazing in terms of a really good rib cage, where his head and neck tie out the top side of his blade. Of the top three, I prefer it where his head and neck ties. Just need to lengthen and level that thing's rump and pull his hind leg out from underneath of him ever so slightly. Barrel here in 4 is the meat and potatoes barrel, if you want to use that term for this one. Man, this thing is wide and stout and dense and burly. A hog that's got a big stout skull and mug as he comes right at you. Like to pick that thing's head and neck up out the top side of his blade, give him a little more show barrel presence. Like to clean up the top side of his neck ever so slightly. But where I really want to take issue with this one is I'd like to shove that hip loin down, lengthen his hip. It doesn't affect the movement of his hind leg. It just affects his balance here as you watch him go across the ring. Young man does an awesome job of getting him drove. Congratulations to him. Got one here that just isn't dialed in from a composition standpoint or fat cover standpoint well enough. He wants to get a little bear over his blade and his forerib and back there into his hip loin. Love his pattern and his balance from the side and his general squareness from top to bottom and front to rear. He just got to be a little more ready for the show here today in this particular class. Man, this one can get, I mean, you could take some pieces out of this one that look very, very neat, but at the end of the day, he's too short-hipped. His hip loin wants to sit up in him, and he's too frail at the base of his jaw for all that mass and power that he has up there through the top side of his skeleton and the center side of his skeleton. Lots of good in that particular hog, just comes in a piecier package. Young man here who struggles to kind of get this gilt going. She's got some interesting pieces for a gilt in this particular class. I mean, that thing's got some shape. She's got some muscle. She's got some look. Comes to us in a lower fronted package that wants to push out on those rears just a little bit as she gets directly away and maybe just not be quite as flexible as I would like her to be. Front 2/3 of this one here again is very, very good. This thing's packing a little bit too much as you crawl around behind him, especially through the base of his ham. His stifle joint and rear leg just aren't handling it as well as they need to. Got one here from the side I like extremely well. Like him coming right at you. Where I take issue is when you crawl around behind him. His legs are almost wanting to come out of one hole as he plants and goes at the base. He's just got to be spread wider there. This hog that's going to finish out the class does have that advantage, but doesn't have all the extras in terms of bone and feature and athleticism. Nice class of reds. Congratulations to all those kids.
Results out of Class 15, Crossbreds. First goes to Nora Hogue. Second, Alexa Graham. Third, Carson Kilmer. Fourth, Lexi Nelson. In fifth, Mason Sanders. We are now ready to show for Champion Division 1 Crossbred. Out of Class 13, congratulations to Alexa Graham, Michigan. Second in that class was Kaylin Dimich, Indiana. Out of Class 14, congratulations, Ashton Harvey, Indiana. Second in that class was Sydney Loudermilk, Indiana. Out of Class 15, congratulations to Nora Hogue, Illinois. Second in that class was Alexa Graham, Michigan. Please put your hands together for these three individuals as they show for Champion Division I Crossbred.
Well, congratulations to those three exhibitors. We dropped those three out, and I think it's kind of indicative of the division that we've been through. We got a few different types and kinds as we went through those classes, and I'm not going to tell you each and every one of these is anywhere near perfect as we step back out here to be able to discuss them for your champion lightweight and just to talk about them. The belted bear here that comes out of the first class, I think you take that one from the side, his comfort level, his mobility is extra good. I like his freshness up high. He's got good shape and mass for a lightweight coming right at you. For me, I just don't know if that one's just manly enough. The shape of his arm, the set to his knee, and just the density of his front foot, to me, he's just got to be a little stouter there in that particular regard in order to be the one that say, yeah, that's the one we got to step out here and use. The one that comes out of Class 2. There's a bear there that's just not messed up anywhere. I think he's true. I think he's square in terms of how he's put together. His skeleton's comfortable. His body shape is good. He's got muscle. Is he out there in any regard? No, he's most definitely not. We talked about that in class. He comes out here amongst these three, and to me, he just hits me. He's a little plainer in terms of his skull, a little plainer in terms of the base of his neck. He doesn't have near the back shape up high as what the other two do, so I had always into your opinion on what you want to do with him. Is there just enough extra out there in terms of his look, in terms of his presence and his shape to be the one that grabs it? And then you get the bear that comes out of the last class, and from that one's hip forward, he's no doubt the one I like in terms of body shape, manliness, stoutness of feature, and yet combining that with a fresh look that's got shape and muscle. Talk about him in terms of his hip. I'd like to make him longer. I'd like to pull him apart at his pin set. I think he uses his hock effectively. I think if we could lengthen his hip and just flex his rear ankle just a shade better, I think he's one we could tie to there as well. So like I said, I think there's give and take amongst each and every one of them. Question mark you want to ask with each and every one of them. I think when it boils down to it, the one that combines stoutness, form, function with some extra all in the same package to the best ability, young man out of the last class will be your champion. Congratulations to him.
Your champion out of Division I comes out of Class 15, Nora Hogue, Illinois. That drops in Alexa Graham from Michigan.
Bring out that other blue bear for reserve, and I thought he pushed that class winner awfully tough. I think he is a notch leveler in terms of his hip. I didn't think he used his hock quite as effectively. I didn't think he was quite as good coming at you right there through the base of his chest. I love his look. I love his presence. I love his stoutness of feature. He's my second favorite. Congratulations to that young lady.
Your reserve comes out of Class 15. The second place, Alexa Graham, Michigan. Results out of Class 5, Duroc. First goes to Brantley Platt, Indiana. Second, Chloe Kemp, Arkansas. Third, Olivia Depew, Arkansas. Fourth, Colton Kilmer, Indiana. And fifth, Wade Smith, Ohio. We are now ready to show for champion Duroc Barrow. Out of class number 1, congratulations to Maddie Antrup, Michigan. Second in that class was also Maddie Antrup. Out of class number 2, congratulations Brantley Platt. Second in that class was Chloe Kemp. Please put your hands together for these two individuals as they show for champion Duroc Market Hog.
Well, I guess I'll fire the first shot across the bow. I've never seen little brother be so windy over there, and I've had to wait on him so long. But looks like he was thorough, and looks like he did a good job with what he did there. So, congratulations to both of these young men or young people out here as they bring out our two class winners. I think it's pretty easy. It's pretty obvious which one needs to go ahead and win. That young man comes out of the last class is going to be your champion. Congrats to him.
Your champion, Duroc Market Hog, comes out of class number 2 of the Durocs. Class 5, congratulations, Brantley Platt, Indiana. That drops in Chloe Kemp for reserve honors.
as we bring that second place barrel out here. That was for sure the deepest class we've seen all day, and I just talked about that hog, you know, where I'd want to change him. I'd like to set him back in his blade there ever so slightly. You got the lightweight class winner that comes out there. That was a good pair in the top end of that lightweight class. You know, you have to ask yourself, is this one, you know, maybe ready enough back there from a flesh standpoint back there in his hip-loin junction? He's carrying just a nickel more in the base of his neck when you get back and study him. I think they're both very, very good hogs. But when a class is that deep and a pair's that good, I'm going to keep them together. The young lady with your heavy is going to be reserved. Congrats to her.
Your reserve champion Duroc Market Hog comes out of class number 5. Congratulations, Chloe Kemp, Oklahoma. Your evaluator today in Ring A is Mr. Brett Byers from Sibley, Illinois. Brett and his wife Jody own Byers Farms, Illinois, a 40-sow Duroc operation with a few Hampshires for his kids' bred and owned program. Brett and Jody have 4 kids, Brooke, Lane, Kinley, and Keaton. Brett currently works for Early Bird as a feed specialist and is also judged in 27 states. Some highlights include Ohio State Fair, San Antonio, and Team Purebred Junior Nationals. Your evaluator today in Ring B for your crosses is Mr. Todd Byers, his little brother from Abernathy, Texas. Him and his wife, Mariah, own Byers Farms, Texas, a 40 sow, Chester, and Crossbred operation. They have 3 kids, Briley, Zane, and Blaine. Todd currently works for Premium Advantage Show Feed as a show feed specialist. He is also judged in 27 states at all levels. Highlights include Ohio State Fair, Team Purebred Junior Nationals, and World Pork Expo. Brett and Todd together give this advice. You don't have to be born into this industry to be successful. Work hard, have integrity, and don't forget where you started, and you will get to the finish line. Please put your hands together for both of our evaluators, the Byers brothers.
As we move into our next division over here on the crosses, we got a little bit smaller class here, but I think good quality. Bear here can give you a good look from the side. Just got to open him up a little bit there, and the way he comes at you behind wants to get a little wide. Another bear there, it's super comfortable. In terms of his skeleton, just needs a little more featured, a little more punch up high. Blue gilt there is just a shade flatter and a shade tighter. Blue bear here is good in terms of his body, fresh in terms of how he's put together. Just want to make him more genuine underneath there. Got another bear here, the kind of funny belted one in the middle, short-bodied, good middle kind of a bear, just a little more limited off of both ends. Good class top to bottom. Another round of applause for those kiddos as they head on back. We'll sort through that top end.
Looks like we got our 10 here in this particular class, and a very deep class of Hampshires. Just one here today, so we got lots of weight spread and lots of different shapes and sizes, even more so than you would have in a regular Hampshire class. But let's give the rest of these kids a round of applause for bringing out a good project here today and their sacrifice to do it.
Another good class, and once again, we've got some give and take here on the top end, and I think the two that are left out are the two that pair up. In my opinion, I think they're hogs that are similar in terms of being opened up and square and genuine. In terms of how they're put together, they got big blades, they got big rib cages, they're good in terms of shape and mass, and I think ultimately both of them probably where you want to get onto them, both probably need change just a little bit in terms of just lengthen both of their hips just a shade, and in my opinion, in order to be ideal. I think it's close between the two. I think there's one just a notch fresher in terms of his skull and his jawline. Get right up on top of him. I think he's got more natural turn coming out of the backside of his shoulder. That's the young lady's painted up bear here closest to me. He's going to go ahead and be one in this particular drive. Like I said, I'd like to lengthen his hip just a little bit to be ideal and just extend his rear leg travel. But I think of this particular drive, he's the one we needs to go ahead and use in this particular class. The blue bear that's going to come next, a lot like him in terms of blade, chest, center body, extra stout in his mug. I like all those things about him. He's broad and square as he comes and goes. At the same time, I just don't read that one quite as fresh in terms of his jawline. Step in behind him, he's another one. I'd like to lengthen his hip. I thought the longer we go with him, the more he wants to stab him and start to push him outside the plane of his hip just a little bit there as well. I think that's a very good top pair here in the top end of this particular drive. I like the bear that comes out next in 3 in terms of his height, his shoulder. I like his proportions. His looseness to his hip and his hind leg is better than the two we start that. Now, I appreciate that about him. That's what made this close for me, because I think he's the one, if we just take him from the side alone, I think we can maybe start to get on board with being one that we can move up into the top spot. It's this view right here coming at me is where he slots third for me. He's another one that's a little more mature about his skull and the crest of his neck. Transition that down into the fact he's not as broad in his chest, he's not as square in his knee and good in his forerib as those two bears that we start with. But I did like his extra ability to hinge his loose a hip and hind leg and still balance from the side. That's a nice bear there that lands into 3. The bear that comes out next in 4, fresher in terms of his appearance than the bear that goes directly ahead of him. I like the stoutness of his skull. I like the way he drives at you. Get right up on top of him. He's another one, maybe planes out just a little bit right there behind his blade. To me, though, I just got to fix him in his hip loin, clean up those wrinkles a little bit, free him up a little bit in the way that he uses his rear leg as well. But I thought a very nice bear there to land into 4. The black-headed hog here that comes out next in 5, a good-chested kind of a show bear that's got a good body shape to him. He's got shape up high. He's another one that's maybe not just quite as fresh in terms of how he's put together. He's got a little more cheek and a little more there through the crest of his neck. I'd like to lengthen his hip. I'd like to extend his rear leg travel. And of the top 5, he's the one that also ran out of gas at the ground in terms of bone and foot size. Bear that comes out next here in 6, good-looking show bear from the side, good range of motion, coming and going. He's just a little flatter, a little narrower, getting in the mid part of his body. He's just too flat in terms of his forerib and his mid body there to move up in this particular class. But he's got good shape up high, hinges loose and good underneath. Got some good tightness of feature there as well. Blue bear that comes next, another one that's got a big chest and a big top laid into him, a little softer on all 4. Want to pick him up in that regard. He wants to start to roll that right rear just a little bit as well. Square him up, freshen him up to the base of his cage. Bear that comes out here next, extra loose in terms of how he's put together. Like to tie his neck in just a shade better. Like to stouten him at the ground to go with all the mass that he has up high. He's a little frailer in his ankle, a little smaller in his foot. Just want to see that thing get out and go and just use his, put his top line down in him just a shade better. Black bear, stout and bulky, just needs a notch extra look and cleaned up just a little bit, freed up a little behind. Bear we close with, same thing, a little more mature in terms of his look, good shape, good muscle, good class top to bottom. Another round of applause there for those kids, please.
Okay, as we get in here to our one and only Hampshire class, so this will be champion and reserve right here in front of me in this particular breed. I think we bring a pair of Hampshire barrows here that a guy can get excited about. I mean, hogs that are built very well for this particular breed. I think there's some differences in terms of presentation. I think there's some differences in terms of one's head and neck tying higher into the top side of his blade and being dialed in maybe a little bit more from a skin and hair standpoint to be a show barrow and to be a champion Hampshire barrow here today. That's a young man on the far end of the ring. I think brings a very, very nice kind of a Hampshire barrow, very proportional. A hog that's equally as tall at the point of his shoulder as he is at the point of his hip. has a comfortable kind of set to his shoulder and a comfortable set to his rear leg. I would like to clean up the hock joints on both of these barrows just a little bit, so I think that becomes a little bit of a wash. Maybe like to take just a nickel of swelling out of him right back there. I don't think it's enough to make a call on it, whether it's good or bad. It's just there. But I think a very nice barrow. This one's the one that hit me first because he was early in the class, and I thought, man, if we don't see another one, this one's good enough to win because, I mean, this thing's rolled up high. That's a broad, burly back with a big arm and a big hind leg. Maybe he wants to turn his hock in there ever so slightly. Maybe not plan on quite as big of a rear foot as that one does in first place as he gets away from you. Like I said, just like to present that one a little bit more from a show barrow standpoint. Take his head and neck up out the top side of his blade a little bit more. That's where a third place barrow has a little bit more of an advantage in terms of presence out in front, a hog that's level in his back and long in his hip, like those things about him. Hog that just has got to be better off of those rear two. He's got to plant and drive with a little more flex and give to that rear pastern and rear hock joint. If we can do that, that certainly makes the conversation interesting up here in the top pair. Got an off-belted barrow here that you got to like a lot of things about, from just looking like a elite kind of a Hampshire show barrow from the side. Skin and hair is dialed in. The young lady does an outstanding job of getting him drove. He's dialed in up high good enough. A hog that runs out of gas from a bone perspective as you take him to the surface behind, and just doesn't do it in an athletic enough fashion for me there as he goes off of those rear two. That one can win a lot of Hampshire barrow classes, though. Got a good class here. Fifth place gilt coming out here. Brings some interesting pieces. I mean, a gilt that brings maybe as big a legs and as much structure as anything in this particular class. Just got to fix her hip and hind leg a little bit, particularly this left rear, and take some swelling out of her hock. And just make her more comfortable out here and more athletic. Shove that spine down, pull that tail head up, and just make her go across the ring. I think interesting parts and pieces. Somebody gets a chance to breed on that one. If she doesn't have to die here today, that one maybe has some value going forward. Got one coming out here next. That's maybe just not quite as fresh as those top five above him. A hog that's got a good skull, got a good enough look out in front of his blade, wants to give up his back line and get a little short stepping off of those rear two, maybe a little narrower at the surface in comparison. We got 7, 8, 9, 10 as we get on down the way here. If we can just go ahead and let them out, girls. Got another one here, another off-belted hog here again. We got to fix a hip and hind leg on this one, just balance them a little bit better. Need more width and dimension in this one right here. Got a lot of quality in this particular class. Let's give them a round of applause as they head them back.
Results out of your Class 16 Crossbreds. First goes to Addie Fitz, Ohio. Second, Hayes Platt, Indiana. Third, Ian Turnbach, Ohio. Fourth, Mackenzie Mitteness, Minnesota. And fifth goes to Millie Foster, Arkansas. We are now showing Class 17 Crossbreds. Results out of your Hampshire division. First and champion goes to Max Heimer, Missouri. Second goes to Ainsley Johnson, Georgia. Third, Cash Murphy, Indiana. Fourth, Eleanor Marshall, Ohio. And fifth, Carson Kilmer, Indiana. Those are your Hampshire results. We are now showing Class 7 Herefords.
Well, by far the deepest class we've had over here on the crossbred side of things, and excited to bring a few of these out. Going to let a few go back that in other classes certainly would have caught some pins. The black-headed bear here is close, and he's probably my next one. I like his chest. I like his body shape. He's a little plainer in his shape up high. I didn't think he was quite as stout at the ground as some of them. We got pins over here and wants to roll in his hip there just a little bit, but I thought that was a nice kind of bear there. The young man's narrow-belted black-legged pig here is another one that's tall-shouldered. He's got shape up high. He wants to funnel and just close at the ground off of both ends, both in terms of just width and in terms of bone and ankle size. Got a blue gilt there on the far side. Neat looking, just needs filled up and freshened up a little bit. Got a bear there on the far side. Good rib, needs a little more shape. Bear here's got some shape and some body to him. Just got to loosen him up and statin him at the ground. Got another bear here that's good in terms of body shape. Needs a shot more true shape and muscle up high and leaving you. Really good class top to bottom. Some good pigs heading on back. Give them a nice round of applause as they head that direction.
Certainly a deep enough class of Herefords here. We're going to have to let a few go back. But here again, let's keep it up today. Let's congratulate these kids for their effort as they head them back to the barn.
Really good class here, and got a lot of quality as we go all the way through 10 in this particular drive. And once again, there's still some give and take, and yet I think this top pair comes to the surface pretty quickly for me. And of that pair, there's one that's just that much stouter wherever you study him in terms of chest, skull, arm, front foot, density of rear leg. That's the young lady in the white sweater on the far side. That one's going to go ahead and be one. As you take him from the surface up, I think he's more comfortable in his shoulder and in his front foot coming at you. He's better in his knee and through the base of his chest. His shoulder angles pitched back in him more correctly. I love his body shape. He hinges loose behind. He pushes the limits of where I want to be from a comfort standpoint. When you step in behind him with where his hock and where his stifle set, he's out there, and he's not for the faint of heart in that particular regard. But I do like his shape. I like his density. I like his balance and his proportions from the side. The one that balances like him is the young lady in the white shirt here, and one that certainly grabs your attention when he comes in. I love his height, his shoulder, his flatness of his back, his length of his hip, the drive of his hind leg. I think all those things go together extremely, extremely good. He functions extremely well in terms of his hock and his rear ankle. To me, he's pitched just a shot forward in terms of his shoulder blade. So why the young lady has a hard time just getting him rolling. He doesn't want to put his head up and go. His shoulder needs to be relaxed. I'd like to change him up at his knee just a shade when he comes right at you. Comparing apples to apples there when you take the bear directly ahead of him, he's not near as stout in terms of his muzzle, in terms of his jaw is what that bear is either. But I think that's still a very, very good pair here at the top end of this particular drive. The bear that comes out next in third, I think one you got to appreciate for a lot of things because he's true and he's square off of both ends. He's stout where he needs to be. He's good looking up front. He's good in terms of his body shape. Love his freshness at the top side of his skeleton. To me, we step in behind him of the initial three. He runs out of gas in the seat of his pants, and yet we set him into motion, and the longer we drive him, he wants to start to throw that left rear, and he's just not as comfortable there as what those initial two bears were. I think that's an excellent trio there at the top end of this particular drive. Bear that comes out next in four, I think has a lot of intriguing things about him. I'd like to blend him together a shade better, but his pieces that are good. I love the shape of his skull. I love the density of his arm. I love the height of his shoulder. His length and height ratio, I think, is spot on. At the same time, he ties his neck in just a little low. His hips just a notch shorter, and because of that, we step in behind him. He wants to start to push and bow just a little bit. We need to square him up in that particular regard. The off-belted bear that comes out next, love his hip and hind leg, love his body shape. He's very fresh in how he's presented. He runs out of horsepower at the top side of his blade, and coming out the back side of his shoulder there, he just gets a little plainer in terms of his shape. Coming right at you, I'd just like to broaden him in terms of his chest just a shade as well. If we just prop him up and study him from the side, I think the bear that comes out next grabs your attention because he's so comfortable and so good in terms of his lines, the way he gets out and goes. He's just not near manly enough when we get to this particular weight. The substance of these bears in terms of muscle, width, bone density, I just don't think he's near as stout. He needs to just be manned up quite a bit to move up. Bear that comes out next, extra loose in terms of how he's put together. Another one that's good in terms of his proportion and his comfort from the side. Coming at you, he wants to come in at his knee. From behind, he wants to close at the ground and push out in his hock. Just a little there as well. 8, 9, and 10, still very good hogs. The gilt that comes out next, extra good in her length and extension up front. Big rolled up back in her. She gets a little soft up front. Behind, she gets a little soft on her rear too as well. Really wants to set that right rear under. Needs to be more comfortable there. Belted bear there's another good bodied, fresh made one. Just gets a little tighter and straighter in his hock and wants to bow out behind. Really, really stout calico gilt here we close with. Just needs to be brought together from the side and loosened up a little bit. Excellent quality class top to bottom. Big round of applause for those kids, please.
Well, as we get over here into the Hereford ring, just one class here, so we're looking at champion in reserve here again, and I think it sorts itself very easily. The one that's going to win ain't necessarily the bigger chested one, but he is the more comfortable athletic one that's just more of my kind, and that's the young lady right here directly in front of me. A hog that just balances and blends the best from top to bottom and front to rear, does it with a little extra added structure, a little extra back shape than this second place barrel. The second place barrel maybe carrying just a little more cover there at the base of his neck and the base of his elbow pocket. Maybe just not as raw and shapely right there out the backside of his blade. Maybe just like to here again, clean him up compositionally a little bit, make him just a little looser as he hits the ground on those rear two. This one is the shapely one of the top three, and I mean that if you prop this one up, he's going to take a good picture because I mean that's a tall-shouldered hog that's edgy in terms of his back. He's got a good hip in him. The longer the drive goes, he just gets too vertical and too restricted on both ends of his skeleton. He too is probably the frailer structured one or the frailest structured one of the top three, but it's his lack of mobility that gets him into the third hole. Got a different one here in 4. Comes in a more moderate, kind of smaller size, kind of a package. A hog that brings some extra density and extra structure to the table and certainly does it in a wide-chested kind of fashion. He wants to get a little low set at the point of his shoulder. Well, we need to clean him back up in his flank down there a little bit. Just the off-type hog that I didn't prefer his type as well as I did the top 3. That's why he lands in the 4 hole. Got one here that was early in the class that brings some quality in this particular breed. Maybe just in too many pieces. He wants to give up his back line and get up in his hip loin there a little bit, maybe just a little narrower on both ends of his skeleton and a little flatter, maybe just not quite as fresh as those top 4. Got a fresh one here coming out in 6 that's got an interesting kind of a color pattern. Maybe comes at you good enough, needs to be fixed as he goes directly away, maybe just needs to be fresher in terms of his center body there as well to get him worked up any higher today. As we start letting 7, 8, 9, and 10 out, got one here that follows him well from a frame size and length and extension standpoint. Here again, we need to correct his upper lines there a little bit. Need to hinge this one a little different off of his rear too. Just need to freshen some as we go down through the class. Congratulations to these kids. Very nice class of Herefords. Really good on the top end.
Results out of Class 17, Crossbreds. First goes to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second, Sydney Bertolino, Illinois. Third, Aubrey Kaiser, Georgia. Fourth, Allison Liggett, Indiana. And fifth, Toby Lichty, Arkansas. Your results for Herefords without halters. First and champion goes to Parker Elsinger, Ohio. Second goes to Cray Emmenheiser in Indiana. Cray is also reserve champion, Hereford Market Hog. Third, Anna Lawrence, Indiana. Fourth, Everett Johnson, Indiana. And fifth, Balin Wallace, Indiana. We're now showing our only class of Landrace, Class 8 Landrace. Class 9 Polands to the makeup area.
Tremendous class over here on this side, and I apologize to some of the young people that are left out here. They're going to get to go back because this is by far and away the most competitive class that we've had on this side of the ring, and I think there's some very good pigs that truthfully probably could have been in the top 5 of other classes that are unfortunately fell into one of them tough ones where they're going to have to go back. First one that's awfully close be this young lady's bear right here in front of me. That one's got a square hip and a good hind leg laid into him and a good rib cage there. I don't read him quite as attractive up there ahead of his blade. He gets a little cheeky, a little crestier at the top of his neck, and yet for all the mass that he does have, stepping behind him, he just runs out of gas there just a little bit down low in terms of shape to his stifle and through the inner part of his ham there. But man, that's an awfully good bear that's not going to catch a pin here in this particular class. The blue bear here, big and fresh up high, good in terms of his body shape. Another one who wants to close just a little bit at the ground from behind, planes out just a little bit from behind and gets a little cheekier up front there as well. Got another bear here that's really fresh and good up high in terms of his shape and in terms of his muscle, skin, and hairs on point. He wants to bow that left rear just a little bit more than what I want him to. He's a little frailer there behind in terms of his muzzle as well. Got another bear here that gives you a good look from the side, just a little plainer in terms of his shape up high. Excellent, excellent class top to bottom here. Give those kiddos a good round of applause. That was a very tough one from top to bottom.
Okay, fire them up, guys. As we get over here into the Landrace ring here, I'm going to grab the microphone before Todd does again. But I think we got a very logical class winner. The young man right here in the center of the ring brings me one that's just the most athletic, most comfortable, probably the most compositionally correct barrel within this particular class. I think a hog that paints a good picture in this particular breed. He might not be the biggest centered one as you get back in there into his rear flank, but I think it all balances very, very well. Hog that's athletic, comfortable, attractive, fresh, good hog. The young lady coming here in second, I guess the decision for me was between second and third. We can let them both out here. I think this one's just more comfortable in terms of his structure and more put together from the side in a more correct kind of fashion. That thing's looser up there in his shoulder set. He's looser in how he hinges off of his rear too and covers the ring and handles it a little bit better. I think two hogs that are very similar and very close. It's athleticism that sorts them for me. We got the heaviest weight hog here, and if you want to say he's the biggest legged one of the drive, I'm not going to argue that at all. He wants to cave in his knee a little bit too much and become a little more ordinary there out in front of his blade. Hog does have some shape, does have some muscle, presented very, very, very well and very capably driven. Just got to loosen and just make that one here again looser off both ends and more athletic to get him worked up. The young man brings a fourth place one here that's giving up some pounds in this particular class, wants to deviate too much as you take him to the surface up front, watch him go. As he goes away, he would like to set down his spine in him and just make him more comfortable off of both ends of his skeleton, but certainly has muscle, shape, and look. The young man does a good job getting him drove. Well presented one coming here next that's going to tip the scales in a pretty large fashion, I'd say. That one's very, very heavy. Are you glad I didn't run you across the scale, buddy? There you go. Yeah, I identify as 115 too, but I don't weigh that. So, good pig, well past his prime. I think the young man knows why he is where he is. 6, 7, and 8 here. Nice class of Landrace barrows here. Maybe just not as well put together, not as fresh, not as dimensional. Congratulations to those kids.
Your results out of your Landrace division. First in champion from Indiana, Cash Murphy. Second, Ella Wilson, Oklahoma. Third, Haley Stevens, Florida. Fourth, Rusty Carothers, Arkansas. And fifth, Nicholas Arcanow, Kentucky. We're now showing Class 9 Poland's.
A fun class to sort, and it's not easy because I think each and every one of them have a ton of quality as we went all the way through 10 down there in this particular drive, and yet I don't think there's a perfect one at the same point. And I think when it boils right down to it, once again, you just got to figure out where your priorities lie and what you want to where you want to set when the day is done, when that time comes. And I think each and every one of these three out here, while they may represent some intrigue in different areas, each one of them probably has a hole we'd like to get into and maybe change just a shade in that particular regard. I guess the one that I take the least issue with in terms of combining correctness of composition with squareness, stoutness, density, and a loose enough package is the young lady's Calico Bear. That one's going to go ahead and be one here in this particular drive. I don't think he's perfect behind. The one that's going to come next in second does hinge just a notch looser in terms of his right rear, especially the way that he gets out and goes, but the one that comes after him doesn't have near the shape, near the mass, and near the just look up through his front end. But I think a very nice kind of a bear there that lands in one in this particular drive. The young man's white belted bear is going to come next in two. Just from a skeleton standpoint, that's the one I like. I love his looseness. I love his comfort. I like his length in terms of his length of hip, the way he drives and uses his rear legs. That's his advantage over the bear that beats him. He's very good in terms of his width and his squareness. At the same time, we study him right here through the base of his neck. He gets a little cheeky and a little chubby there. Get right up on top of him. He doesn't have near the true shape and turn coming right out of the backside of his shoulder as that bear on either side of him, for that matter. Young lady, your bear from his hip forward, he's the one I can get excited about. I love that thing's look. I love his width. I love his squareness. He is maxed out in terms of his back shape and his spread up eye. I like all those things about him. He's still good in terms of his body shape. I get back into his hip, and that's where we got to change him. He gets a little shorter and a little steeper back there. The longer we go, the tighter he gets in his hock, the tighter he gets in his rear ankle, and he wants to start to swing and get uncomfortable. Young lady does an excellent job getting that one driven. I think three excellent bears there, the top end of this particular drive. Young man in four, I really like this one in terms of his height of shoulder, his length of body, and just how everything blends and puts himself together from the side. He's very comfortable in terms of his hip and his hind leg. I'd like to change his front foot, pick him up, maybe give his dew claws back to him there as well, and step in behind him. To me, of the top four, he just runs out of gas. He's the plainest in terms of his shape. He's the plainest out to the top side of his hip. Just like to bust him open, provide him a shot more true width all the way through. Young lady in five, from this one, shoulder blade back. He's the one I like as well. I like his length of hip. I like the density and squareness of his rear leg. Good body shape, maxed out up high in terms of shape, in terms of muscle. From there forward, he gets a little too cresty, a little too thick through the middle part of his neck, coming right at you. I didn't think he was quite as square in terms of his knee there as well. The black-headed bear that comes out here next is one that can give you a good look from the side. His shoulder blade and his front foot, everything lays together extremely good. He's good in terms of his body shape, square in terms of his chest. He's another one that gets a little plainer and maybe not quite as fresh in terms of his shape up high. He's another one as we step in behind him and where his hock sets in relation to his rear foot. He wants to plant and roll just a little bit. I'd like to change that about him. Calico Guild here that comes out next, extra stout, extra dense, extra burly in terms of how she's put together. She's a little more jammed up off of both ends. I'd like to stretch her out just a little bit. I'd like to make her withstand the drive a little bit better off of her rear too as well from a looseness standpoint. Big belted bear here that comes out next. I like his height, his shoulder. I like his look and comfort level from the side. He needs to be opened up in his chest, get right up on top of him. In a class of this particular quality and substance, he's just a little flatter at the top side of his blade, a little flatter in his forerib there as well. Bring out 9 and 10 there, a pair of bears that are similar. Hogs that got width and got muscle. Hogs that maybe just need to redesign out of their hip and hind leg and the way that they go, maybe pushing a little extra cover as well. Really good class top to bottom. Once again, like I said, ton of quality. Give those kiddos a good round of applause.
Results out of Class 18, Crossbreds. First goes to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second, Brantley Platt, Indiana. Third, Brenna Dreyer, Illinois. Fourth, Luke Cathy, Arkansas. And fifth, Sophia Nelson, Texas. We are now ready to show for Champion Division 2. Out of Class 16, congratulations to Addie Fritz, Ohio. Second in that class was Hayes Platt, Indiana. Out of Class 17, congratulations to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second in that class was Sydney Bertolino, Illinois. And out of Class 18, congratulations to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second in that class was Brantley Platt, Indiana. Please put your hands together for these three individuals as they show for Champion Division 2 Crossbred.
It's been a really fun division, and I think we dropped these three out, and I think they're all three ones that guys can get excited about in terms of what they represent, and maybe once again, like we've talked all day, maybe you change one of them up in an area or two. I think that just comes down to it, and there's not a perfect one that's ever been made, probably not a perfect one that's ever going to be made from that standpoint. I think these three are awfully good. One that does it best for me in terms of combining extra look and presence with substance and feature, and one that can go. Young ladies Calico wins that last class. Congratulations to her.
Your Champion Division 2 Crossbred comes out of Class 18. Congratulations, Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. That drops in Brantley Platt for reserve honors in Division 2.
I think it comes very close for reserve, and I think, you take that black-headed bear there on the far side that comes out of the first class of this division. He won that class, and a class that maybe provided us some challenges in terms of movement, and I think you drop him back out here, he gets just a little tighter. The way he's made there wants to come apart in his hip loin just ever so slightly. The bear that wins the middle class, we talked that one just being so stout, so square, and one that's still hinged very good in that particular drive. bring him into this particular setup and comparing him to the other two, I don't think he ties his neck quite as well there. Like we talked in class, you step in behind him, he's maybe one that just pushes the limits a little bit more than necessarily where I ideally want to be in terms of how he's put together. Then we drop in that second place bear, and I think just from a sheer width, squareness, functionality standpoint, and skeleton, how that one's put together, I think he's awfully good. I love his rib cage. I love the dimension to his hip. Like I said, he gets a little plainer in terms of his neck and through the base of his jawline there. Change that about him a little bit. So I think that's a give and take when it boils down to it. One that does it next best for me in terms of comfort, width, squareness, substance, and putting it all together. Young man, I was second out of that class to be reserved. Congratulations to him.
Your reserve champion Division II comes out of Class 18. Congratulations, Brantley Platt, Indiana.
Well, hats off to the Poland breeders around inside the ring. I mean, we got 3, 4, 5, 6 of these things that I think are very good in their own right, or who's ever got anything to do with these or has something to do with these. There's one out here that combines the other two for me that I think leads this class fairly easy, and that's the young lady right here to my right in the pink top. I think the combination barrow in terms of one that brings the heaviness of structure of one with the balance and design. He's taller at the point of his shoulder than another. Hog that collects himself on the move and just balance and proportions very well. I mean, that thing is an outlier from a substance standpoint in this particular breed. But our second place one, if that thing passes a pedigree check, somebody cost themselves a lot of money by cutting that thing, in my personal opinion, because that thing does not look like a Poland hog like the masses of them. I mean, that thing brings a lot of extras in terms of extra look out in front of his front end to have that big of a set of appendages on him, especially as he goes directly away. You'd maybe like to lengthen the top of his hip and level it just a little bit. We could say that with our third place hog here just as well, but that thing's use of his hind leg and as big as his appendages are, I think ties a lot of neat things together. If we can just relax this one in her rear pastern, particularly off of that left rear, and just pull her tail head up and lengthen and level her hip, we're talking about a whole different ball game here. The longer the drive goes, she just wants to get them shorter and stabbier off of those rear two. Like the front 2/3 of that one extremely well. Just got to lengthen and level that hip and make that hind leg more comfortable. Same thing can be said for the fourth place barrow here. This one's got to be longer hipped. He's got to be more athletic off of those rear two. That is a round-bodied hog that's got a really good shape up high, that's got a lot of look out in front of his blade in this particular breed. When he come in there a little earlier, I thought, man, that one's gonna plow through this class probably pretty well, but had some heat and had some depth. There's going to be some awful good ones here come out down the line that just resemble the depth of this class. Good patterned hog here. There's nothing wrong with this one. He just doesn't bring the extras from a show pig standpoint that the contemporaries above him do. Gets a little longer sided, a little longer backed. Maybe he wants to give it up there just a little bit. Becomes a little more ordinary out in terms of his out in front of his blade there as well. Got one here that's a little sharper out in front of his blade. Maybe not quite as edgy up high, wants to get a little tighter and more restricted off of those rear pasterns, get a little more Polandish, if you will, in terms of how that pastern sets on him. 7, 8, 9, 10 here. Good hogs. I mean, we got hogs that got some rib cage. This one gets a little too vertical off of both ends and runs out of gas as you take him to the surface from a feature standpoint. Got one here that needs a little more shape in the base of his britches there. Good class. Congratulations to all these kids.
Results out of your Poland division. First in champion, Emily Wilson, Oklahoma. Second in reserve, Georgia Stockton, Arkansas. Third, Laney Green, Indiana. Fourth, Tucker Ross, Alabama. Fifth, Dylan Briley, North Carolina. We are now showing Class 10 Spotted Hogs.
Another good class here and some close calls. The young lady's black-headed bear that's out here, I think, wanted stout and square and got muscle. Fortunately, maybe looks like he's withstanding an injury there on his back right and just not as comfortable. Like to see that one get out, go if we could do that. I think he could move up. The wide-belted bear here is comfortable in terms of how he's put together. Gets a little frailer at the surface and maybe not quite as just fresh in terms of his look and shape. Bear headed out here is extra comfortable as well. Just got to mass him up and just give him a shot more all the way through. Freshen this bear up here, but he's loose in his skeleton. Another tall-shouldered, good-looking one here. Just needs opened up some underneath. Good class there, top to bottom. Give those kiddos a round of applause, please.
Class 11 Spotted Hogs. Class 11 Spotted Hogs. We need you in the makeup area. Last and final call.
class that maybe comes together just a little easier than the one did here directly in front of it. But I think it's a nice pair that comes to the top. But I think one just puts himself together from a proportion standpoint from the side just that much better. His height to length ratio compared to his length of hip as well, I think just fits together that much better. That's the young lady in the white sweater there on the far side. That one's front end, and the way he's built in terms of his shoulder angle to set to his arm, knee, front foot is set awfully good. He's big and maxed out up high in terms of back shape and center body. He maybe wants to stab that left rear just ever so slightly every once in a while. I think he's a very nice bear that needs to go ahead and win in this particular drive. I love the skull, the arm, the chest, the front foot substance of the bear that comes in too. That one steps out the gate at you and lets you know he's here. That one's broad about his eye, and he's big in his blade. He's big and he's fresh up high. Turn him to the side, and maybe he comes in a few more pieces. I think he's a little lower set to the ground in relation to his height of shoulder, and then I know in relation to his length of body, you get into his length of hip, and he's just a touch shorter there. I'd just like to stretch him out and lengthen his rear stride just a little bit to be there ideal. I think that's a very nice bear there to land into too. The blue bear that comes next is kind of the opposite of the one that goes directly ahead of him from the side. I like him in terms of his height of shoulder. I like his length of hip and the function of his hind leg. Still big and fresh up high, coming right at you through the base of his chest. For me, he's got to be better. He wants to cave at his knee, gets a little flatter there through his forerib and down into his heart. Just man him up in that particular regard and square him up there. I think he's one that pushes that top pair even that much harder. Young man that comes out next in four's got another one. It's got a big blade, and he's got a big top laid into him. He's big at the ground in terms of bone and foot size. Shoulder angle from the side is laid into him appropriately as well. Coming right at you, he wants to flick his front foot from the side. I didn't think he hinged quite as loose through his upper hip or through his right hock as what he does elsewhere. I think we just loosen that one up and just pull him together just a shade better from a build standpoint behind. I think he's one, once again, can move up in this particular class. Calico bear that comes out next, kind of a nuts and bolts, kind of a big blade, big bodied, got some muscle to him. He's not quite as fresh in terms of how he's put together. He's maybe not quite as broad and square in terms of his chest as maybe that bear that goes directly ahead of him. But I thought he was a good, functional, good piece of livestock that needed to work up in this particular class. Hog that comes out next here in 6, I think one that give you a lot of good views. I love her skull, love her chest, her arm, her body shape's very good. It's when she turns and leaves for me that she needs to drop down. I just got to pull her apart at her pin set. I got to square her up at her hock and not put so much pressure on the outside of her toe as she leaves you. 7 and 8 here. I think another hog that's good in terms of his height, his shoulder. He gets a little timid out of his front end and not quite as comfortable in terms of how he's put together. Another one we change up coming at you just a little bit here. Bear that's good in terms of his body shape and his mass up high. Needs to tie himself together from the side. His neck gets a little lower. He wants to wash out in his hip loin and plane up just a little from behind. Big extended bear comes out next. Another one needs to be pried open and just busted open. Coming right at you and giving a shot more rib shape and body. Our bear we close with. Another one just wants to funnel at the ground. Love his bone, love his body shape and his mass up high. Relax him a little in his shoulder. Really good class once again, top to bottom there.
Class 11 Spotted Hogs last and final call. Class 20 Crossbreds last and final call.
As we get into the class of spotted hogs, I think maybe we got 2 of them over here. I guess we do. We got 2 classes, awful heavy ones up here in the front end of this first class, and I think we got 2 or 3 or 4 of these things that are very good animals. I think there's one that just looks like a show barrow out here, looks like a high-end show barrow, and is presented as such. Very, very well driven, a hog that's got a good look out in front of his blade, a hog that's got the advantage as he comes to you in terms of squareness of foot placement. He's not necessarily the one that's the more busted open at his hock going away, but he uses it very, very well and maintains squareness. The blonde young man there on the far end is going to go ahead and win this particular class. The predominantly white barrow coming here next, just a little paler, I guess, if you will, or just a little more common in terms of skin and hair. Hog that's probably bigger in terms of his pin width, but wants to push the envelope getting away from you just a little bit right here. We need to correct his feet there at the surface. Now talk about all the good in this thing. This thing's got a big arm and a big blade in him, packing a lot of punch out the backside of his blade into the center portion of his cavity and following that throughout his hip. I mean, that's a very, very good animal. Wants to round in the top of his hip there just a little bit as well. When this one come out, I thought this one will win a lot of spot classes, and the longer he's out here and the longer you study him, he becomes more piecey. Hog that is long neck, but he's very deep neck, and he's very thick necked up there at the top of his crest. Hog that's short in terms of his side, wants to get a little shorter in his hip. Hog that has some spread and dimension and width. I'd like to peel some fat and some grease off the base of his neck and the base of his elbow pocket there, and maybe just make him bigger footed and more comfortable off of those rear pasterns and rear toes as he goes along the surface as he heads directly away from you. Got one here I moved up in class just because he's not that one that maybe strikes you coming out the gate, but the longer you study him, there's really nothing wrong with this hog. He's proportional in terms of his height to length ratio. Hog that's not necessarily the slickest necked one, but he's a little more ordinary in terms of that. A hog that just fits together very well, but doesn't really bring any extremes or anything extra. Just becomes a little plainer in terms of his top shape. Just a good practical kind of a spotted barrow to land there in that hole. If we could take this one and pick her up him up, in his spine and just make it blend back there in its hip loin better, we could talk a different conversation, because I think there's a lot of good in this particular one, but man, wants to get kind of just real easy backed as he goes directly across the ring there. Just kind of falls out of balance. Got one here that I pinned back a little later. Tall shouldered hog that wants to rise up in his hip loin. Hog's got some shape, got some look, got some muscle to him, wants to get a little tighter off of those rear pasterns and rear step as well as we let 7, 8, 9, 10 out here. Lots of pieces and parts, maybe just not athletic enough, maybe just not quite fresh enough through the center portion of their cavity to work on up today. But let's give these kids a round of applause as they head them back.
Results out of Class 10. Spotted Hogs first goes to Jack Tarter, Indiana. Second goes to Austin Amick, Indiana. Third, Leah Emmenheiser, Indiana. Fourth, Avery Hutchinson, Ohio. And fifth, Olivia Jenkins, Ohio. We are now showing Class 11 Spotted Hogs. This is your last and final class of Spotted Hogs. Results out of Class 19, Crossbreds. First goes to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second goes to Harley Mabry, Arkansas. Third goes to Thomas Pontius, Ohio. And fourth, Nora Hogue, Illinois. And fifth, Emmylou Rader, Indiana.
Another bigger class here with a lot of quality, and we've got some that are very close. The young man's belted bear there on the far side's got a big top and some muscle laid into him. Just got to make him a little more comfortable in terms of how he's put together. Young lady over here in the black's got one. It's got some rib shape and got some shape up high as well. Gets a little flatter and plainer in his jaw, a little more uncoordinated and just not quite as good in the way he utilizes his hind leg. Black bear here is good and with shape up high. Just want to open him up some underneath, give him a shot more rib and body to balance out. Bear here is really good in terms of his rib cage. Wants to get a little flat on all fours. Just want to give him a little more integrity there and just make him a little more comfortable in the way he goes. Tremendous, tremendous class, top to bottom. Some good pigs headed back to the pens. Let's go ahead and give them a good round of applause, please.
Very nice pair of spotted hogs out here on the top end of this class, and even 3, 4, 5 got some depth of quality, but I think we got one out here that just combines a lot of the things I'm looking for from a freshness standpoint, a hog that brings all the balance and levelness up high that you'd want. Still does it in an attractive, heavy bone kind of a package. Young lady's gilt needs to go ahead and win this particular class for me fairly easy. The young man's barrow right here probably does bring maybe just a little bit extra punch right out the backside of his blade if you want to get up there and just study him and top him out. Where he doesn't bring as much is through the center portion of his cavity. He wants to get a little flatter and plainer, or flatter and more pinch down there, if you will, in his heart, just a little flatter in terms of his forerib and just his center midsection there. Just maybe looks like we're fighting some weight, but a hog that's certainly square and powerful off both ends of his skeleton. Just got to fill him out in the center to get him up any higher here today. Looks like one that's been around a minute here in terms of this third place barrel, but his pattern and his balance and his feet and legs and athleticism is what gets him into the third hole here. I love how this thing's built and assembled from the side. Just not enough of him from end to end from just a dimension and freshness standpoint. Just need to have more spread and shape out the backside of his blade and out there through his hip. But I do like the pattern and build of that hog extremely, extremely well. Just wish we would have maybe seen him a little earlier in his life. A stout, rugged one coming here next that's a little more ordinary at the base of his jaw there and the base of his neck. A hog that certainly has some structure, has some athleticism to go with that structure, just a little plainer in terms of his back shape there and not quite as broad as you get up on top of him as those top three in that particular class. Got one here that starts coming in pieces. He wants to pinch out the backside of his blade and roll up in this hip loin there. Certainly got some big legs and some neat features. His upper lines have got to be better for me today to make it work any higher. Got a young lady here that brings, if I remember right, a gilt that maybe just gets a little tighter in her rear foot and rear pastern. Wants to get a little stabby as she goes to the surface. We need to pull some wrinkles out of her there just to freshen her up. 7, 8, 9, and 10 here. We can start letting these go out. Got a young lady here that's got an awful nice kind of pig that is actually wanting to walk for her there now. A hog that's busted open and fresh on both ends of his skeleton. Maybe gets a little frailer as you take him to the surface, particularly up front there. Young lady's got better days ahead of her in terms of a show career, but I think she does an awful nice job for where she's at right now. Done a nice job with that barrel. Let's give all these kids a round of applause as they head them back.
Another really good class over here on this particular side, and we end up with a top pair that suit me really well, and I think they're a little different. Maybe they where one excels, the other one maybe falls out just a little bit, and vice versa. And I think it's really close. And I think when it boils down to it, I think there's one that's just a notch stouter in terms of how he's put together. I think just in terms of his jaw, in terms of his arm, in terms of his blade and his upper skeleton, he presents himself with just a shade more freshness as we get back into his hip loin. That's the young lady spotted up there here closest to me. He's going to go ahead and be one in this particular drive. I don't know if he's any better in his chest than the bear that's going to come next into two. I'd like to change him in his knee in the way that he comes right at you. I'd maybe like to tie him in his neck just a shade differently there as well. I think that's getting awful critical, though. The black-headed bear here is one that can give you a really, really good look from the side. I love his height to shoulder. I love the way his top line draws up. That one's length of hip and the bend to his hind leg from the side is made awfully neat, and yet his rear leg's got some substance to it, some density to his ankle. I don't read him quite as stout through the front end of his body. To me, his muzzle's not quite as stout. Coming at you, he's a little flatter in his arm. He's not as stout in terms of his ankle and his front foot as that bear that we start with in that particular regard. He's maybe not pushing as much cover, and because of that, he gets a little flatter and drier in terms of his mid-body there as well. I think that's a very, very good pair that's got a lot of trade-offs in that particular lineup. Bear that comes next in thirds, put together very well in terms of blade and just width and squareness, the way he comes at you. Center body shape and dimension up high is laid into him extremely well. Big and square in terms of his hip. I don't think when you step in behind him in relation to the two that beat him, he wants to maybe start to get a little questionable in terms of his hock and how he uses it. I don't think he just drives and reaches quite as well out of his rear two as the two bears that beat him. I think that's another good bear in a top trio of this particular class that represents a lot of quality. The black-headed hog here that comes out next, one that is a little denser in terms of how he's put together than the bear that goes directly ahead of him. He's got some shape up high. He's got a big hip laid into him. At the same time, we step in behind him. He wants to start to swivel just a little bit in terms of how he's put together from the side. He reads maybe not quite as fresh in terms of his lower body, not quite as fresh there in terms of his hip loin, but a very nice bear there that's sound, practical, stout in terms of his feature, got shape and got muscle here in this particular drive. The bear that comes out next in 5 is one that's big and fresh up high. He's got a good hip and hind leg working into him. He gets a little plainer in terms of his look up front. I think his shoulder blades laid on his body just a shot flatter. He wants to deviate at his knee just a little in the way that he comes at you there as well. Hog that comes out next here in 6, another one you appreciate in terms of his freshness and his dimension he carries at the top end of his skeleton from there to the surface. He wants to close up just a little bit. I think he gets a little frailer in terms of his ankle, in terms of his foot. Maybe just doesn't balance quite as well from the side. Hog that comes out next here in 7 is a gilt you appreciate in terms of shape, in terms of muscle, bone, density. She's another one wants to close, and the way she comes at you, take her to the side. The longer we drive with her, she gets a little easier in her top line, a little easier in her hip loin, takes away from her look and her balance. Bear that comes out next here in 8, one is starting to show just a little bit of wear and tear in terms of how he's put together. I'd like to freshen him in terms of his skull, like to freshen him in terms of his muscle shape up high. He's true and square underneath, got big legs and a good hip. Thought he worked up in this particular class. A little more extended type of bear here than another one that's got some shape and some muscle up high. I'd like to change him the way he comes at you, change him the way that he leaves you, and just square him up underneath, stouten him at the surface a little bit. Our bear we close with from the side can paint a really good picture, leaving you. He's just got to have more to him. Open him up in his pin set and loosen him up just a little bit behind. Tremendous class there, 1 through 10. Give those kiddos a good round of applause as they head on back.
Results out of Class 11. Spotted Hogs. First goes to Laney Green, Indiana. Second, Preston Ford, Iowa. Third, Brenna Dreyer, Illinois. Fourth, Taylor Hamelman, Indiana. And fifth, Hudson Brown, Indiana. We are now ready to show for Champion Spotted Hog. Out of Class number 10, congratulations to Jack Tarter. Second in that class was Austin Amick. Out of your just completed Class number 11, congratulations to Laney Green. Second in that class was Preston Ford.
Well, as we get out here and vie for champion spot, I think we bring 2 hogs out here that I'm very, very happy with. As you step off to the side of them and just watch them go across the ring, 2 hogs that are assembled from a skeleton standpoint, exactly the way I like them. I think the difference lies when you get up on top of them. There's one of them that's just got more shape and dimension out the backside of her blade. She carries that advantage all the way back into her hip loin and probably sets her rear foot just a little squarer at the surface. Young lady's heavyweight's going to be your champion spot. Congratulations to her.
Your champion spot comes out of Class number 11. Congratulations, Laney Green from Indiana.
We're going to bring that second place bear out here immediately, and one I talked about in class in terms of maybe just like to give that one a little more general feel. I'm sure we're plenty big, but you talk about one that for that weight is dialed in very, very good from a shape and muscle standpoint up high. I mean, that thing's a truck and a beast when he comes right at you, and he leaves you equally as square. Like I said, he just wasn't as fresh through his midsection. He's the second best one today, though. He'll be your reserve. Congrats to him.
Your reserve spotted hog is Preston Ford from Iowa. Results out of Class 20. Crossbreds. First goes to Hadley Hendrickson, Indiana. Second, Nolan Hogue, Illinois. Third, Sophia Nelson, Texas. Fourth, Bristol Hopkins, Kentucky. And fifth, Jada Dent, Georgia. We are now showing Class 21 Crossbreds. And Class 12, Tamworths.
Good pair of Tamworth Barrows up here on the top end of this lightweight Tamworth class. I think two hogs that pair up very, very well in terms of just general type and kind. I think there's one that's more of my speed from a look and perspective out in front of his blade and just a length and levelness of hip. Just his upper lines and his eliteness in this particular breed are going to propel the darker barrow here to the top to go ahead and win this particular class. The lighter colored barrow is a lot like him. Maybe just has a little bit more condition on him. Maybe not quite as edgy up there out the backside of his blade and over his loin edge there. But I think two hogs that are assembled very square from the surface up. I think win this class very easy. The young man comes out here in 3 with one that's maybe not got quite as good a skin and hair, a hog that does have some extra substance underneath of him in this particular breed, fighting a gland deal there in his left flank, but a hog that has some uniqueness, like I said, in this particular breed, just needs to be fresher and bolder and bulkier. work him on up there today. The young lady coming out here next has got one that a little more traditional in terms of his shape and bone structure. Hog that wants to deviate a little bit as he goes to the surface off of a frailer hind leg and a smaller rear foot. Hog you just like to put a little bit more shape in comparison to those top three in this particular class. Young lady coming out here in the 4 hole has got one that has some unique pieces. I mean, the way this thing's head and neck comes out of the top side of its blade, got some back shape down there as you get up on top of him. Wants to jump up in his hip loin there a little bit and get a little stilty off and restricted off of both ends of his skeleton. Got one here that's just a little plainer in terms of just back shape and just general build. Covers the basics very, very well. Just doesn't bring the extras that we're looking for to propel him up any higher in this particular class. Nice class at Tamworth. Congratulations to all these kids as they head them back to the barn.
Got a big class on the cross side here and some heading back. We talked to each one of the kids here already about what their bears are good. Maybe some we just want to freshen up a little bit. Some of them we got to just make them a little square, a little more genuine underneath, stouting some of them up, give them a shot more. Really good class, some good pigs heading on back. Good round of applause for these kiddos that are heading back to the pens. We're going to sort through your top end.
Results out of Class 12. Tamworth first goes to Braxton Armstrong, Indiana. Second, Garrett Reed, Indiana. Third, Owen Stout, Indiana. Fourth, Kaylee Scott, Indiana. And fifth, Carly Woods, Indiana. We're now showing Class 13, Tamworth's.
Well, we're going to let some Tamworth Barrows go back to the pins here in what can easily be said the deepest Tamworth class I think I've ever judged in my lifetime on this earth. But got some here that would catch pins in any ordinary Tamworth class. So let's give these kids a round of applause for their effort as they head them back today.
Really good class over here on this side, and yet I think there's one, in my opinion, that comes to the forefront pretty quick. That's the young man's black-headed bear in the middle of the ring right now. I think that's the dense, comfortable bear that's true and square off of both ends. He's got extra big legs and big feet, but yet his joints are clean and they work. They're square in how they get out and go. He's got a big square hip, a neat look. He's not as aggressive in terms of his back shape as what maybe the bear is down the line here in third, but I think a very, very good, high-quality show bear there to go ahead and win this particular class. Young lady on the far side in the stripes is going to come next in two, and I like that one in terms of his width and his squareness and the way he comes at you. He's got a good skull shape laid into him, big in the middle part of his body. I don't read him quite as true out the backside of his blade. To me, he's getting a little chubbier in terms of the way that he's put together. Step in behind him, and maybe we change the shape of his right hock just a little bit as well. Got just a little puff there on the outside of it. We'd like to clean up there just a little bit to make me comfortable to say that's the one we need to go ahead and use. I think that's a very nice show bear there to land into three. Young lady in third, when that one hit the ring initially, I thought that one was going to be tough to turn because when he came in, that thing was loose and bendy and stout and square. Yet as the drive wears and as it goes, he starts to fall apart just a little bit on us there, wants to come apart, and the way his hind leg gets out and goes, gets a little tighter, a little shorter, wants to come apart in his hip loin. I love his bone. I love his width. I love his freshness up high. He's just got to withstand the drive better in order to get a piece in this particular class. Young man in four from the side, and this one hip forward. I like a lot of things about him. I love his look up front. I like his height, his shoulder. He's extremely fresh in terms of his skin and hair. His range of motion is awfully good. Coming right at you, he needs to be better at his knee. To be honest, from the side, although he does hinge and go extremely well, I think the length of his hip and where his tail sets throws off his balance and his proportionality just a little bit there, but a very nice show bear there to land into four. Bear that comes out next in five. Impressive at the top side of his skeleton. Big and wide and fresh and good in the middle part of his body. Got a great big upper hip laid into him as well. I didn't think he presented himself quite as well from the side. He gets a little shorter and off in terms of his hip. His hind leg travel all wants to stay up underneath of him. I'd like to see him be able to leave his hind leg on the ground a little bit longer, stouten him at the surface and square him up just a little bit, both coming and going. The bear that comes out next, big and fresh up high, good in the middle part of his body. To me, he's a little more vertical on both ends. He's a little straighter in his shoulder, a little straighter in his knee. Thought maybe behind he got a little shorter in his hip. Just got to see him get out and go and take the ring a little more aggressively off of both ends. Maybe two, we could just square him up in his knee just a shade in the way that he comes at you. Another bear here you appreciate in terms of just covering the basics. He's stout and square in terms of the way he comes at you and leaves you. Reads with a little more maturity about his head and skull there. Like to change that about him. Like to freshen him up at the top side of his skeleton just a little as well. Hog that comes out here next gets a little plainer, a little fatter in the way he's made up there through his front end. I'd like to peel a little bark off of this guy. I'd like to fix him at his front feet just a little bit there as well. Just change him. I think maybe burn him off a little. Couple classes earlier, he probably fits from a frame and substance standpoint just a shade better. Bear that comes out here next, extra stout and extra burly in terms of how he's put together. He wants to start to wrinkle up just a little too much in terms of his top line. Maybe one that's pushed a little past his prime in terms of where he's at from a maturity and freshness standpoint. Bear we close with, if we could clean this guy's hocks up, I think he's one we could look at maybe moving up. I like his proportions. I like his look. He's comfortable up front. Just got too much swelling, too much chubbiness there in his hocks to get out of 10. But I thought a really good class there top to bottom.
Well, if you left the purebred side of the ring and you're at all passionate about the way Tamworth hogs should look, I'd advise you to step over here and look at the top 10 in this particular class, because like I alluded to when we let the rest of them go back, I've never been a part of judging a class of Tamworths that's this deep. We've got a hog down in 7 that's got a little bit of an injury that's going to land him in there that is an awful good hog as well. And we get these top 2 out here, and there's one of them out here that is next level, in my opinion, for this particular breed in terms of one that just paints a picture of an elite kind of a show barrow. That thing's upper lines and the length to his hip and the usefulness and the density to his hind leg is extremely good. He's square as he comes right at you. That one right there is an awful good Tamworth barrow. Congratulations to that young lady. This dark barrow would win a lot of them, and rightfully so. This dark barrow is a very good pig. Relating him and just in and of himself, this hog is not as deep in his heart. He's not as punchy there and as shapely down in the base of his forerib. Man, that thing's got some big appendages. He's got an awesome look. He's comfortable. He's flexible. A very nice pair of Tamworth barrows up here on the top end of this class. The young lady coming out in the 3-hole here, this barrow does not come at you quite as square in terms of the placement to his knee. This thing has got a high gear and a very loose skeleton. Very good in the roundness in the center part of his rib cage. A lot of things about that one in this particular class. His knee's got to be better to get him up any higher. Barrow coming out here in 4 is better in terms of his chest and his knee as he comes right at you, but is not as athletic, is not as trendy, and is neat at the base of his neck and the top side of his neck even there as well. But a very high quality barrow to be here in the 4-hole. As we start letting them out just a little bit more, I mean, we got one here that wants to creep up in his hip loin there just a little bit and get a little tentative off of his rear too. Maybe just not quite as secure. We got a high speed one here that is probably just a little too raw for me there today. A little too raw in his forerib. I think this is a very nice Tamworth barrow, like I alluded to. That left rear has just got to move better in this particular class today. It looks like he's been fighting that injury here for just a minute or two. The young lady coming out here next has got one that could win a lot of Tamworth classes. That thing's got shape. He's got enough bone in this particular breed, just in relation to this class, runs out of the extras. Really nice class. Let's give all these kids a round of applause as they head them back.
Results out of Class 13. Tamworth first goes to Hattie Bannon, Indiana. Second goes to J.C. Slagle, Ohio. Third goes to Sadie Wyrick, Indiana. Fourth goes to Allison Stoner, Maryland. And fifth goes to Lily Raber, Ohio. We are now ready to show for champion Tamworth. Out of class number 12, congratulations to Braxton Armstrong from Indiana. Second in that class was Garrett Reed. Out of our just completed Class 13, congratulations, Hattie Bannon, Indiana. Second in that class was J.C. Slagle from Ohio. Please put your hands together for the class winners as they show for champion Tamworth.
Well, as we get our 2 class winners out here and just watch them and study them from the basics of skeletal build and balance are very similar in a lot of regards. There's one that's a man that come to the hog show today, and I don't care what color you paint this particular animal. That's just a good individual. Young ladies heavyweights, your champion. Congratulations to her.
Your champion, Tamworth, comes out of Class 13, Hattie Bannon. Congratulations. That drops in J.C. Slagle from Ohio for reserve honors.
We bring that darker colored barrow out, and I talked about in class here, we just like to maybe give him a little more depth down there to his heart and his forerib. I think it gets a little closer here for reserve. I mean, that pair out of the lightweight class I thought was awful good. I think these 2 pair up here in terms of just about as well as the champion did with this other class winner in terms of just being the same kind of type and kind, cut from the same cloth. Here again, I think there's one that's a little more ready today that brings a little more of the extras. I'm going to keep those heavies together. Congratulations to this young lady right here.
Your reserve is the second place in Class 13. Congratulations, J.C. Slagle. Results out of Class 21, Crossbreds. First goes to Henry Cawley, Georgia. Second, Jada Dent, Georgia. Third, Katie Hikas, Kansas. Fourth, Craig Wishmeyer, Indiana. And fifth, Millie Foster, Arkansas. We are now showing Class 22, Crossbreds. This is the last class in Division 3. First and second place, Class 19, 20, 21, and 22.
Good final class over here on the crosses, and some of these you can start to see are starting to maybe show some issues as far as fighting weight or maybe maturity. Young man's got a big fresh presented bear in terms of skin and hair there. Just want to be able to fill that guy up and just broaden him out a little bit in order for him to catch a pin. But I thought that was a nice bear that was really close. Saddleback bear here is another one that's good in his hip and hind leg. Just got to freshen him up in terms of his skull, in terms of his back shape. Maybe just fighting a little bit there. Young lady on the far side there's got a paler skin bear that's got some muscle. Just got to fix him underneath and clean up his hocks a little bit. Bear here's another one, just needs freshened up. Another bear here needs a little shot more when you get right up on top of him. The black-headed bear here's another one. It's got some width in the way he comes at you. He's got some shape. Just want to freshen him up, change him from a maturity pattern standpoint. Really, really good class there, top to bottom. Give those kiddos a good round as they head on back. Tremendous pair here, actually top trio as we go in this particular class, and I think it's close, and I think there's minor differences between them, and I think, but each one of them to make this much, to have one that's this stout and this powerful and yet this loose and still fresh in terms of how they're put together is certainly kudos to the folks who are behind these, because I know that's not easy to do. I think that's a really good pair, and there's one I keep coming back to that is just so loose and so pliable in terms of how he's put together. I don't know if we've had one that just handles his hip and hind leg as effortlessly and as flawlessly as what this one does. His length to his hip, the bend to his hock, the bend to his rear foot is also so good. He's set shape, he's got muscle, his neck doesn't tie perfectly, and that's where I get critical. I'd maybe change him up in that regard, but he's true, he's square, he's big at the ground, he's big up high. I like the off-belted bear here in front of me to be one here in this particular class. The one that holds the slight freshness advantage up high in terms of just being that much more powerful, that much more dense in terms of his upper skeleton is the spot back bear here, and I like a lot of things about him too. He's another one that although he's got an attitude, he's maintained his flexibility and just the way he gets out and goes extremely, extremely well. I guess where I get issue with him is we get right up in front of him. To me, he's one that's starting to lay on a little extra cover there through his cheek and through the base of his neck. I step in behind him in relation to that mass that he carries out the back of his shoulder and through his upper skeleton. He wants to flatten and get a little plainer there in his lower stifle, gets a little bit shallower in terms of his twist, in terms of how he's put together. That's getting awful critical of a pair of really, really good bears there that have stayed fresh and stayed functional in their skeleton to a heavy weight. That's super impressive to me in a very, very challenging, good top pair. The calico bear right here, if we could change that view right there coming out the gate, I could get on board with this dude because that thing is presented to a T in terms of just freshness and just the way he's made up front. He hinges loose enough behind. His length of hip is good. Coming right at you. He wants to wing out at his elbow. He wants to roll them front feet together. We change him in that regard. And yeah, if we're talking ideals, maybe we'd lengthen his hip just a shade still as well. But man, that's a fresh presented, stout structured one that still goes and balances. Young ladies does an excellent job with him. The blue bear here from his shoulder blade back. I think another extremely good bear. Good in the mid part of his body. He's fresh up high. Got an excellent hip and hind leg. And the way that he gets out and goes and travels. I like the density of his skeleton. I like his height of shoulder. Unfortunately, with that height of shoulder, we've rolled that shoulder blade forward just a little bit more in that forearm. He wants to get a little softer, and coming right at you, he wants to deviate at his knee just a little as well. But man, once again, critical. Did not expect to find four bears of this particular shape and quality in a class this heavy here in Louisville, Kentucky. The bear that comes out next in 5, certainly no slouch either. Bold-bladed, big and fresh up high. One that just gets a little tighter in terms of the way he's made through his hip, hock, and rear ankle. Maybe he just wants to roll in his shoulder just a little bit as well in the way he comes at you. But once again, a freshly well-presented bear there. Young man does an excellent job with. The black-headed hog here that comes out next. At the top end of this particular class, he's the one that probably just runs out of freshness up high. Maybe just gets a little more mature looking about his head and through his rib cage there. Just like to freshen him up in that regard, because that's still a sound, structured, stout-featured bear that's got muscle. Just in this particular class and this particular quality, he needs to be better at his knee and needs to be a little fresher. The black gilt, another one, shape, muscle, bone is all very good. Gets a little tighter in terms of her hip, in terms of her hock. Change the shape of her hock there a little bit as well. We step in behind her. The belted hog that comes out here next, one that is a little looser in terms of how he's put together, but another one's just starting to show a little age and maturity there. Didn't read him quite as dense at the ground. Like to freshen him up high. Red bear here, big-bodied, wide-made kind of bear. Gets a little plainer up through his front end, a little plainer in his shape. Like to just peel a little cover off of that guy. Bear we close with there, extra shapely, extra muscular. Just wants to get a little funky in the way he handles his rear too. Excellent last class across us. Give those kiddos a good round of applause.
I'm going to beat Bryce to the punch here real quick. And just one class of Yorkshires here, so this will be your champion in reserve in this particular class. And I think a nice class and a good pair up here on the top end. And I think when you get it to this pair, there's one that's simply just more athletic. He's a little heavier duty. He packs a little more punch behind, but at the same point in time, he's got a bigger rear ankle. He's got a bigger hind leg from his hock to his rear foot and a more comfortable rear ankle. Plants and drives, very, very good. Has more just genuine spread. Young man in the purple shirt's going to go ahead and have your champion Yorkshire. Congratulations to him. Now the young man here in the pink shirt, or sporting the pink shirt. Man, that thing's elevated at the point of his shoulder. That thing's neat looking out in front of his blade. His presence and his upper line is very, very good. That thing's just got a hinge a little looser behind for me. Come at me with a little stouter kind of an arm and a front leg there to get worked up any higher today. I see the young lady left her paint can at home here today, and I appreciate that. But the barrow she brings to me here just gets a little longer body, maybe wants to trail off in his tail head there and just get a little rounder and piecier at the top of his hip. But a barrow that covers the basics from the surface up very, very well in terms of having some extra foot size and some extra density and structure. Has a good look out in front of his blade. Here again, just probably a little longer spined and can't keep it all quite together. Same can be said for the next barrel coming out here. Just wants to get plenty long in terms of length of spine, and it just kind of gives up in his top line. Wants to get just a little bit too easy there as he goes. Maybe wants to narrow up at his base there a little bit as he gets directly away from you. Got a big stout one with a flag tail coming out here next. It's got some interesting pieces. I mean, you got to love this thing from the side, from a height of shoulder, head and neck presence, and just show barrel look, kind of proportions where you get to studying him. He comes right at you. He wants to deviate at his knee. He wants to rise up in his hip loin and trail off at his tail head there and just get a little piecier on the move. Got one here coming here next. It's kind of a tall fronted, short-bodied kind of a hog, and you do got to appreciate that about him. Got a long enough kind of hip. Just wants to cave in his knee and get a little too frail in his front end and front foot as he comes directly at you. Not the stoutest one in his hind leg as he directly leaves you there as well, but an interesting hog to be down here in this particular class. Got one here, another one here that's got a lot of interesting pieces. Man, that thing is fresh. That young lady's done a very good job on skin and hair on that thing. Got a big old stout tail, head root there. Got some look out in front of his blade. Wants to cave too much as he comes right at you at his knee. Here again, wants to rise up in his hip loin and just come out of balance. As we turn him out here, as we get down the road, got a lighter weight one here that's just given up a lot of maturity and density. Very, very good class of Yorkshires. Congratulations to these kids.
Results out of Class 22, Crossbreds. First goes to Nolan Hogue. Second, Chloe Kemp. Third, Brinkley Smith. Fourth, Fletcher Inman. And fifth, Mason Sanders. We are now ready to show for Champion Division 3. Crossbred. Coming out of Class 19, congratulations to Anna Frankie, Oklahoma. Second in that class was Harley Mabry, Arkansas. Out of Class 20, congratulations to Hadley Hendrickson from Indiana. Second in that class was Nolan Hogue, Illinois. Out of Class 21, congratulations Henry Cawley from Georgia. Second in that class was Jada Dent, also from Georgia. And out of Class 22, congratulations Nolan Hogue, Illinois. Second in that class was Chloe Kemp from Oklahoma. Please put your hands together for these four exhibitors as they show for Champion Division 3 Crossbred. Results out of your Yorkshire division. First and champion, Travis Cox, North Carolina. Second, Landry Medley. In reserve, Landry Medley, Illinois. Third, Liza Klingenberg, Michigan. Fourth, Hattie Bannon, Indiana. And fifth, Jordan Kelly, Indiana.
This has been a really fun division, and I like all four of these class winners. We drop back out here. I think all four of them are certainly ones that represent a ton of value and just a ton of quality. Let's go and give these four exhibitors out here a good round of applause, please. when you start breaking them down, I think it becomes extremely close because I think where maybe parts and pieces fall, maybe we've got another one that corrects things just a little bit. But I think ultimately, once again, like I've said and stated before, I think there's one that I think just does it as good as any in terms of this particular division. And he does so just because he is so good in terms of his skeleton, in my opinion, to be one of this particular weight and stature and substance, and yet to still be able to get out and go and just run laps around the other three out here in the way that he goes coming out of a competitive class there as well. Like I said, his neck attachment isn't perfect, but man, this thing's big and bendy at the ground, and he's square and he's true. He's got shape. He's got muscle. I like the one out of the last class. Congratulations to him.
Your champion Division 3 comes out of Class 22, Nolan Hogue, Illinois. That drops in Chloe Kemp from Oklahoma for reserve honors in Division 3. Division winners. Be getting it on your mind. We will take a short break between Division 3 and Champion Crossbred.
I don't think it gets any easier for reserve. And then just to talk about him real quick, the young lady's belted bear that wins that first class of this particular division. Man, the word dense just comes to mind in terms of that particular bear. That is a big cage and a big back, a big skull and a big arm, and he comes at you so good through his chest. We talked there in class. Is he perfect off that right rear? No, he's not. And the longer we go with him, he wants to stab, and maybe too, we get ultra critical amongst the contemporaries out here. We change him right there at the pole of his neck just a little bit to be ideal. The calico bear there on the far side that wins the second class, man, that one's another one. It's very loose and pliable in terms of how he's put together. Got a great big cage, a big square hip, and a hind leg that functions as well as any. Like in that, as the one we use in this division, change the way his neck ties in just a little bit of his relation to the contemporaries out here as well. He's another one that starts to get just a little off in his belly line. He gets a little deeper and a little puffier back there in his flank. A little puffier there in his jawline as well. Bear that wins Class 3, extra burly and dense at the ground. Is he wild enough in terms of just his shape and his spread up eye in relation to these other three? No, and maybe that's where we get on to him, just freshen him up there just a little bit. But I thought that one was a very, very good bear. Then we drop out that one out of Class 4, and another one, hip and hind leg, is built extremely good. He's beefier up high than the bear we used to beat him in that particular class. Like I said in class, little cheekier, maybe not quite as good at the base of his neck. For me, though, in terms of density, shape, extra looseness, and how he's put together, he's my second favorite. Congratulations to her.
Your reserve out of Division number 3, Chloe Kemp, Oklahoma. Again, we will take a short break before we do Champion Crossbred. So if you had a division winner or a reserve, we need you in the makeup area.
been a really good crossbred drive, and I think we dropped these three out of their respective divisions. And like I said, and it's one of those things. I don't expect them to all be cookie cutter in terms of how they're put together. Good hogs come in different packages, and that's fine. I think within each division, I was happy with what we had and what we were able to bring back, and I like all three of these very well. And not to take anything away from our little lightweight bear over there, I think that's a neat pig. But in Brett and I's opinion, both, I think it comes down between these other two. And I think Brett said it best, and I mean ultimately we could get a long ways with a lot of them if we could take it and we could combine the two. We'd come up with one that I think was pretty bulletproof in terms of how they're put together. I think they're both very good, and where their strengths and weaknesses lie is kind of contradicting. The heavyweight bear is, like we talked, just so loose and so pliable. When you introduce him into this pair, is he as burly and just as massive up high and stuff as what this calico bear is? No, he's not. And then you take the calico bear, and man, he is so good everywhere, just in terms of density and look and proportion and just how he's made up high. He is absolutely maxed out in terms of back shape and center body. Does his left rear move just good enough to be the one that you say, well, that's the one we need to use? That's where I'm at, in my opinion. That's talking to Brett. He shares the exact same opinion. I think it's incredibly close when it comes down between the two. Ultimately, like I said, you got to be able to go home and be comfortable with where you're at in terms of what they are. I think the one that does it best with the least amount of holes, and maybe one that just pushes the limits just that much harder, Calico is going to be your champion. Congratulations to her.
Your champion comes out of Division 2. Congratulations, Anna Frankie from Oklahoma. That drops in Brantley Platt for Reserve Honors.